Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Jake Wagner. Hannah Mae Roden, 13, and Edward Jake Wagner, 18, met at a dance and quickly became lovers. As a result, the Roden and Wagner families began to spend time together, sharing weekends and parties, and Hannah Mae and Jake's love continued to grow. When Hannah Mae turned 15 years old, she revealed that she was pregnant. Jake was delighted with the news and hoped his family would be too. The Wagner family placed great emphasis on tradition and family lineage, and they adored children, viewing them as a continuation of their traditions. In fact, they often passed the name down from generation to generation, as seen in Jake's family, with his father being George Wagner III and his brother George Wagner IV. On the other hand, the Roden family had a more practical approach to family life. Even though they were divorced, Christopher Roden Sr. and Dana Roden remained close and devoted to their 3 children, prioritizing their happiness above all else. Unlike the Wagner family, the Rodens lived modestly, with Christopher working odd jobs and Dana as a nurse's assistant. Despite economic limitations, the Roden family instilled strong traditional values in their children, including Christopher Jr., Hannah Mae, and Clarence, Frankie. The family was overjoyed when Hannah Mae gave birth to a daughter named Sophie, and they threw a big party. However, when Jake asked Hannah Mae to move in with him and his family, she refused. She became increasingly wary of Jake due to his increasingly controlling and aggressive behavior. Hannah Mae was initially attracted to Jake's caring and thoughtful nature, but over time, she realized that Jake was trying to limit her independence. Jake's aggression repeatedly caused Hannah Mae's feelings for him to cool. Her refusal to move in with Jake created tension with him. Jake believed that Hannah Mae was preventing Sophie from growing up in a safe and healthy environment. Despite Hannah Mae's denials, Jake became increasingly controlling. Hannah Mae finally ended the relationship in March 2015, tired of Jake's aggressive behavior. At that point, the Wagner family wanted sole custody of Sophie. Jake had to put in a lot of effort to convince Hannah Mae to sign over custody of the children to him and his brother. However, Hannah Mae refused. In a heated exchange, Jake angrily sent a text message saying that if necessary, he would use force to gain custody of Sophie. This revelation confirmed the Wagner family's willingness to use coercion and intimidation to achieve their goals. To protect herself and her daughter from this unscrupulous family, Hannah decided to distance herself and raise her child alone. She chose to work as a nursing assistant, continued her studies, and took care of Sophie herself. The situation escalated when Hannah became pregnant again. Although Hannah confirmed that the child was not Jake's, he still had doubts and tried to discover the truth. In December 2015, Jake logged into Hannah's social media accounts but found no evidence of an affair. A trial ensued, involving repeated interactions between the Wagner family and Hannah. In one text message, Hannah asserted that the Wagner family would have to get rid of her before they could gain custody of Sophie. Jake shared this letter with his family, angering them. His grandmother, Rita Newcomb, 65, retaliated by forging an important custody-related document. During the custody trial for Sophie, Christopher Roden and George Wagner III had a heated argument. This incident caused a complete rift in the relationship between the two families. The Wagner family soon came up with a terrible idea. They believed that Hannah Roden was uncooperative and decided that the only solution was to eliminate her and the entire Roden family in order to gain custody of Sophie. By Christmas 2016, this twisted idea was the start of a terrible crime. While everyone focused on love and celebration during the holiday season, the Wagner family had other intentions. They held a family vote to decide whether to continue with their evil plan or not. After everyone agreed, they assigned each person roles and began preparing. The Wagner family spent 5 months researching the Roden family home, including surveillance cameras, daily habits, and work schedules of each Roden family member. Each member of the Wagner family was assigned a specific task. Angela Wagner purchased a communications blocking device and planned to secretly install it on the Roden family's phone to prevent anyone from being able to contact the police. George Wagner, 3, offered to build a homemade silencer and handle transportation the night of the crime, securing a truck and not attracting attention. Meanwhile, Sophie was safe at home with Angela because the court had awarded Hannah and Jake joint custody of Sophie. The Wagner family chose the time when it was their turn to care for Sophie in order to keep Sophie safe. It was clear that the Wagner family had meticulously planned every detail to carry out a perfect execution. At approximately 8 a.m. on April 22, 2016, George Wagner, 3, visited Christopher Roden under the pretense of offering Christopher a job opportunity that could improve his family's financial situation. However, the job offer was just an excuse to get into the house. A moment later, Christopher Roden Sr. opened the door. A while later, as usual, Bobby Jo Manley arrived at Christopher's house to take care of the Roden family's animals. While outside the house, she noticed someone was inside, which was unusual for that time of day. Every member of the Roden family usually went about their work and was not at home. However, when she entered the house, she found Christopher and his cousin Gary, 38, lying in a pool of blood. Horrified, Bobby grabbed the phone and called emergency services, reporting what she had seen and asking for assistance. Still shaking, Bobby went to other relatives' houses and knocked loudly on one of their doors. A 3-year-old boy, the son of Clarence Frankie Roden, appeared, and Bobby asked him where his parents were. However, the boy did not respond but just pointed towards the bed. When she entered the house, she witnessed another horrifying scene. Clarence and his wife, Hannah Hazel, lay motionless. Lying between them was their 6-month-old baby, still alive but covered in the blood of Clarence and Hannah Hazel. After Bobby's 911 call, police quickly arrived on the scene. As the officers approached the Roden property, a neighbor intervened, sensing worried. He requested that the officers check 2 additional addresses of family members. His concern was justified, as police found bloodied bodies in the 3rd house. The victims were identified as Dana, 19-year-old Hannah Mae, and 16-year-old Christopher Jr. The attackers had spared Hannah's youngest child, a baby girl only a few days old. Later, another victim was discovered, 44-year-old Kenneth, the elder Roden's brother, who lived a 15-minute walk from the others. By 2 p.m., 8 victims had been identified: Christopher Sr., Dana, Clarence, Hannah Hazel, Christopher Jr., Hannah Mae, Kenneth, and Gary. The only survivors were young children, a 3-year-old, a 6-month-old and a 4-day-old newborn, along with 2-year-old Sophie, who was at the Wagner home at the time of the incident. After examining the bodies, police concluded that all the victims had been killed in their sleep by gunshot wounds. Detectives later reconstructed the events of that day. Christopher Sr. was awake when the attackers burst into the house, as evidenced by a wound on his right arm. Christopher Sr. attempted to defend himself but was hit with 9 shots to the head, torso, and limbs. In addition, 5 bullets were removed from Dana Roden's neck and head. The rest of the family died from gunshot wounds to the head. Gary was shot 5 times, Christopher Jr. 4 times, Clarence and his wife Hannah Hazel 3 times each, and Hannah Mae twice. Kenneth was the only one shot once. In total, the assailant fired 32 shots, with some shots fired after the victims were already dead. Some bodies also showed signs of physical abuse. Since no one in the area heard anything, investigators believe the perpetrators used silencers, indicating a carefully planned and executed act. It was clear that the victims were targeted, and someone wanted revenge on the entire Roden family. During the search, police found 5 Remington shell casings of different types and an unused bullet from a different gun model. The scale of the case shows that this was a case with multiple murderers. Leonard Manley, Dana's father, claimed that the criminals must have known the family well, or the dogs would have been barking loudly. The question of who committed this act kept police officers busy. The Attorney General's office provided over $20,000 for the Roden family's funeral. Roden family were buried in several stages. On April 28, 2016, Gary was the first to be laid to rest in South Shore, Kentucky. Hannah Hazel's funeral followed on May 1 in the village of Atway, Coteau County, Ohio. The remaining members were buried on May 3 in West Portsmouth, in the same county. Many local residents attended to pay their respects to the family. The surviving children were placed in the care of relatives. The neighborhood was gripped by fear. Police advised relatives of the victims to take precautions and warned all residents of Pike to stay their homes at night. The brutal mass murder outraged residents across the state, who demanded that the investigation's findings be made public and the perpetrators be caught as soon as possible. As part of the investigation, the murdered family's 3 homes had been investigated, followed by several more vehicles the following day. Forensic experts had participated in the investigation and had meticulously examined the homes, but no DNA evidence of the suspects had been found in any of the homes. Cameras had been installed in the houses, but they had not provided any useful information because they had been disabled. It seemed the culprit had planned every detail carefully, leaving no clues behind. However, detectives eventually discovered a key piece of evidence that had helped solve the case. An important detail was that marijuana plants were discovered at 3 crime scenes. At one location, around 200 plants were found. The police believed the cannabis was grown for sale rather than personal use. This led to speculation about the involvement of Mexican drug traffickers. However, the amount of cannabis found was too small to suggest an attack by an entire cartel. In January 2017, a close relative of the Roden family was arrested for drug trafficking. This was considered a coincidental circumstance. Leonard Manley stated that his daughter, Dana, had no involvement with the cannabis operations. Some family members confirmed that the older brothers, Christopher and Kenneth Roden, grew marijuana, but they were unaware of any large-scale cultivation. Specialized equipment for breeding chickens for fighting, as well as cages with roosters, were found at the Rodens' house. However, it soon became clear that illegal cockfighting was not the cause of the homicides either. Months went by without uncovering the true motive behind the crime. On April 13, 2017, local authorities announced they lacked sufficient evidence to make any arrests. Nevertheless, prosecutor Rob Yum stated the investigation was ongoing, suggesting they had some leads they were not yet ready to disclose. Another year had passed since the mass crime occurred, and its second memorial service went largely unnoticed. There was no coverage in the local press, and neither the sheriff or the prosecutor attended the memorial service. This led the community to believe that the investigation had stalled. However, on May 12, 2017, a special weapons and tactics team unexpectedly raided a home in Pike County, about 10 miles from the crime scene. Initially, they were searching for suspects, but it was later revealed that they were gathering evidence. Detectives also searched a house in Adams County that had once been owned by Jake Wagner, although he had sold it by then. The investigation took a dramatic turn on June 20, 2017, when the focus shifted to the Wagner family. The investigation included 26-year-old Jake, 27-year-old George III, 47-year-old George IV, and 48-year-old Angela, who lived approximately 15 miles from the victim. The Wagner family moved to Kenai, Alaska, claiming they were struggling to stay in the area. The Wagner family expressed their love for the Roden family, saying their deaths had devastated the Wagner family. The investigation indeed had a breakthrough. Authorities were seeking information from the public about the Wagner family's dealings in guns, ammunition, vehicles, and other related topics. According to the investigation, every family member was involved in the crime that occurred on November 13, 2018. The Attorney General announced that the Wagners and their sons had been arrested and charged with planning and carrying out the murder. Rita Newcomb, the 65-year-old mother of Angela and Frida Wagner, the mother of George Wagner III, had also been arrested for perjury and obstruction of justice. In 2019, Rita Newcomb had undergone handwriting analysis to confirm her role in forging guardianship documents for Sophie. To avoid going to jail, she had entered a plea deal. As a result, the charges against Frederica Wagner were dropped in June 2019. 2 years later, on April 22, 2021, Jake had reached an agreement with the prosecution. In exchange for revealing details of the crime, all family members would receive life sentences instead of the death penalty. Jake had admitted to killing 5 of the 8 individuals and had received 23 criminal charges, including 8 felonies. The remaining charges had included theft, conspiracy, illegal possession of ammunition, forgery, interception of messages, unlawful use of property, obstruction of justice, corrupt activities, and unlawful intimate conduct with a young woman. Jake had explained that he saw eliminating Hannah May as the only way to ensure custody of his daughter. He believed that if he did not kill the entire Roden family, they would seek revenge and refuse to give custody of Sophie to him. Angela was next to face trial on September 10th. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy, aggravated robbery, and tampering with evidence. In exchange for her testimony against the other defendants, the murder charge was dropped. Angela received a sentence of 30 years in prison. The trial of George Wagner IV had begun on August 28, 2022. Although he denied any involvement in the crime, the prosecution presented evidence of his participation in the planning, execution, and cover-up. Ultimately, George IV was found guilty on 22 counts and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. George III's trial was scheduled for February 2024. Despite the convictions of his family members, he maintained his innocence. The once harmonious family's descent into madness was baffling, and their actions were unforgivable. The actions of the Wagner family left 3 children orphaned, depriving them of the love of their parents, relatives, and a peaceful life. One couldn't help but wonder what Sophie would be like when she grew up and realized what had happened. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore, the case of Diana Maria Cayer Lopez Pinal. Diana Maria Cayer Lopez Pinal was born on August 12, 1998, in Madrid, to parents Diana Cristina Lopez Pinal and Juan Carlo Cayer. She has a younger sister named Valeria. Her family was wealthy and everyone in the family was very close-knit. But their lives hit a snag in 2013 when Diana's parents divorced. However, the father still visits his daughter regularly on holidays. In the summer of 2016, Diana, her mother, and her younger sister spent their vacation in the small coastal town of Apab du Carmel, a place they had visited many times before. The town, with a population of around 10,000, is a quiet and picturesque retreat away from the hustle and bustle of city life. On the evening of August 21st, Diana told her mother that she was going to meet her friends at Val Inclin Park to celebrate the Feast of the Virgin Carmen. The park was close to their vacation cottage, and Diana often walked there. Her mother gave her permission to go. Diana spent a fun evening with her friends, she unaware that it would be the last time they would see each other. At around 2:30 a.m., she said goodbye to her friends and began her home. On the way, she ran into a friend, Paso de Ariel, near her favorite pizzeria. He was the last person to see Diana that night. The next morning, August 22nd, 2016, became a nightmare for Diana's mother, Christina. When she realized her daughter hadn't come home from the party, she grew concerned. Diana's phone was off, which only added to her worry. Without hesitation, Christina contacted the police and reported her daughter missing. According to Christina, Diana didn't have any serious emotional or mental health issues, despite her parents' divorce when she was younger. Police opened an investigation into Diana's disappearance, looking into the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Diana's disappearance is a mystery that investigators must unravel. Their first clue came from the last message she sent to a friend in Madrid via WhatsApp. In these messages, Diana mentioned a stranger who was stalking her and shouting strange phrases, causing her to feel scared. Unfortunately, these were her last messages, after which she stopped replying to her friend's messages. During their search, they found a black hair band along the road that resembled the one Diana was wearing that night. Although this was the only evidence found at the scene of her disappearance, it gave investigators a clue to work with. Diana's friends had no information about her disappearance. Additionally, there were no CCTV cameras in the area where she was last seen. The street was dimly lit and deserted, with only a few garages and an old nightclub. Although some people reported seeing Diana get out of a car with 3 men and then get into another car, but these were not corroborated. The investigation into Diana's disappearance considered 2 primary theories. One possibility was that she was kidnapped by someone she knew. The other theory is that she was the victim of a random attack by a mentally unstable individual. Diana's mother proposed a third theory, speculating that her daughter might have been taken away by boat. New information emerged when Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend revealed that she had met a man from Morocco and purchased hashish with him. However, this detail only added to the complexity of the case. The media reported that the clothes Diana wore on the evening of her disappearance had been found, but her mother disputed it, saying it was not true. Several factors suggest that Diana did not leave voluntarily. Her credit cards and identification were still in the house. It suggests Diana's disappearance was forced, but the case remains unsolved and remains a mystery. After Diana vanished, the media reported on a fight between Diana and her mother that had occurred just days before. The press claimed that Diana had a nervous breakdown and needed medical attention. Her sister Valeria was also hospitalized with similar symptoms. To avoid conflict, the court awarded custody of Valeria to her father. The decision was made as a precaution due to the stress of Diana's disappearance. The father and Valeria left town, sparking rumors that the family was hiding something. Diana's friends revealed that running away from home was not unusual for her sisters, especially 16 years old, Valeria. The family dynamics were complex, and arguments between the mother and daughters were common. This information raises a question: if Diana regularly left the house without any problems, why was her mother so worried this time? On August 31st, Diana's parents failed to appear for a press conference, where they were expected to provide an update on the investigation into their daughter's disappearance. According to the family's lawyer, her parents were too distraught to attend, as they were struggling to accept the possibility of never seeing Diana again. An article published in El Mundo on September 11th revealed new information about the family's situation. Contrary to the mother's claims that Diana did not have mental health issues, it was reported that Diana had previously gone missing for 3 days in April. During this time, she had turned off her phone and told her mother that she no longer wanted to live with her. The mother had not contacted the police, which raised concerns about her response to her daughter's behavior. Letters exchanged between Diana and her younger sister Valeria were also made public, shedding light on the emotional struggles both girls were facing. Valeria had been hospitalized multiple times in the past year, including one instance where she had to have her stomach pumped due to an overdose of prescription medication. Prosecutors have launched a new investigation into the alleged abuse of Valeria, the youngest daughter of the family, due to the lack of progress in the case of Diana's disappearance. The investigation into Diana's disappearance is currently in progress and is moving forward quickly. Forensic experts have analyzed several items belonging to Diana, including her toothbrush, comb, computer, diary, and prescription medication. Investigators have also questioned her acquaintances, including a young Moroccan man she had a brief relationship with. Unfortunately, these efforts yielded no results and police searches remained unsuccessful. The police have conducted extensive searches in the surrounding mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes. However, it appears that Diana disappeared at around 3 a.m., and the last signal from her phone was detected in the Tarragon area, 13 miles from her family's location. 72 days after her disappearance, Diana's case remains unresolved. However, police have found a hairband and a cell phone matching the description of Diana's phone. Her father has confirmed that the phone belongs to his daughter. 2 months after Diana went missing, her Facebook profile suddenly became active again. Her friends and family quickly informed the police and provided screenshots. It appeared that the "Remind Password" feature had been used, allowing someone to access her account without knowing her login details. This led to 2 possible explanations: either Diana had forgotten her password and was trying to regain access, or someone else was attempting to break into her account. Diana's phone was a key element in the case, but it did not provide any useful information that could help explain her disappearance. The investigation finally made progress on November 10, 2006, when the driver of the car in which Diana was last seen was identified. The driver had a history of being involved in human trafficking, but this information was kept confidential to avoid jeopardizing the investigation. Initially, he had an alibi for the night of Diana's disappearance, as his wife claimed he was with her, which temporarily cleared him as a suspect. On December 25, 2017, a new piece of information came to light that greatly helped the investigation. A girl was attacked by a man who demanded her phone and threatened her with a weapon. She screamed, and a passing couple intervened, saving her from the assailant who attempted to drag her into his car. The traumatized girl quickly contacted the police, providing a description of the attacker and his vehicle's license plate number. The next day, the police arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abuengay, who had a previous criminal record. Significantly, Jose Enrique was the same individual who had been detained in 2016 on suspicion of kidnapping Diana but was released due to an alibi provided by his wife. Police re-questioned Jose Enrique and his wife. Following the interrogation, the wife admitted that her initial alibi had been false, and in reality, Jose Enrique was away from their home on the night Diana disappeared and did not return until 4 a.m. Jose Enrique initially claimed that he had accidentally hit Diana with his car and, fearing discovery and imprisonment, he had dumped her body. However, he later changed his story, confessing to kidnapping and murdering her. According to Jose Enrique's new testimony, he went to the beach to look for gasoline from abandoned cars, and that's where he met Diana. The confession of Jose Enrique reveals shocking and disturbing information. He kidnapped Diana, attempted to force her into a sexual act, and ultimately strangled her. This shocking confession sheds light on the case, confirming that Diana's disappearance was a heinous crime. The disappearance of Diana Maria Cayer Lopez Pinal has been a traumatic and lengthy case for her family and those following her case. The investigation lasted 494 days, and was heavily covered by the media, with many unfounded and damaging rumors about her parents, causing them great distress and making the investigation more difficult. Despite these challenges, investigators persisted and eventually gathered enough evidence to identify the perpetrator. Diana's loved ones remember her as a beautiful, energetic young woman whose short life was unfortunately ended after an encounter with a violent man. Although Jose Enrique initially withheld information about Diana's whereabouts, he eventually revealed the location of her body. allowing her family and friends to hold a proper burial in January 2018. Her body was discovered in the well of an abandoned warehouse. The perpetrator, Jose Enrique, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Smith family. George Smith was born and raised in Greenwich, Connecticut. He came from a close-knit, caring family, an environment that nurtured his intelligence. His father, George Smith Sr., owned the liquor store in the town, which was not just a job, but a passion that brought him joy. George Smith pursued higher education in business at Babson College in Massachusetts and graduated in 2000. After completing his studies, he worked in Boston as a data mining analyst for several years. However, he realized that his true passion was helping his family in the business. In 2005, George made the conscious decision to return home to learn the basics of business from his family's store. His goal was to one day take over the business, allowing his parents to retire and enjoy the fruits of their labor. In 2002, at a reunion with old friends, George Smith met Jennifer. She, a Connecticut native who had just found work as an elementary school teacher, would later become his life partner. George was immediately attracted to her beautiful appearance, open personality, and strong ambition, and they quickly fell deeply in love. George's parents also welcomed Jennifer with open arms. 3 years later, in 2005, when George was 26, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. Their picturesque wedding ceremony was held right on the beach at the Castle Hill Inn, Newport, Rhode Island. Nai sao bui lu, cap doi moi koi de ten hong tuan trang mat xa hoa kio de 12 gay tren du Thuyen Royal Caribbean. Their journey began in Barcelona on June 29, with stops in France's Côte d'Azur and along Italy's coast. On board, George and Jennifer befriended another couple and a young man named Josh Askin from California. Josh Askin, a 20 years old with a great sense of humor, quickly became friends with George. The group had a great time together. On July 1st, when the ship docked off the Italian coast, they decided to spend the day on land. July 4th, they explored the island, wandering through the narrow streets of the old town, swimming in the crystal-clear Aegean Sea, and sampling local cuisine in quaint taverns. They were carefree and happy, enjoying each other's company and the island's beauty. The group left Mykonos with unforgettable memories and planned to continue the fun on the ship's deck that evening. After a romantic dinner, George and Jennifer rejoined their friends on the ship. The group decided to get together and enjoy a good time together, laugh and create memories of their vacation. The evening was filled with laughter and excitement. After enjoying appetizers and drinks, the newlyweds, accompanied by Josh Askin, headed to the ship Ciaschino to continue the fun. George and Josh Askin spent their evening enjoying a game of craps, while Jennifer had fun playing poker at a nearby table. As the night came to a close, the newlyweds had lost a substantial amount of money, but they joked about it lightheartedly, unbothered by their losses. After the Ciaschino closed, they decided to keep the party going. Later, around 2:30 a.m. on June 5, 2005, security cameras on the Greek island of Mykonos caught footage of George leaving the Ciaschino, but it remains unclear whether he returned to his cabin afterwards. George Smith, a 26-year-old newlywed, is on his honeymoon with his wife Jennifer. They is having a fantastic time together, soaking up the lively atmosphere and entertainment on board. However, their enjoyable evening suddenly takes a mysterious turn. Upon investigating the incident, the ship's captain searched George's cabin, finding unusual footprints under the window, as well as evidence of a disturbance on deck. George was missing, and footprints at the scene suggested there may have been a struggle, raising doubts about George's safety. The sudden disappearance of the newlywed couple spread quickly, causing passengers on the ship to become worried and scared. The crew cordoned off Deck 7 and restricted access to cabins while they searched for George and Jennifer. After finding blood, it was presumed that they had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The senior officer took charge of the investigation and went to their stateroom to gather more information. Based on the evidence, it was suspected that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for they continued on the other side of the ship. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found in a ship spa, where she was receiving a pre-booked massage. She looked surprised and worried, claiming she had no idea where her husband was and hadn't seen him since the previous night. According to Jennifer, she woke up and found George not there, but she thought he was with friends or in another cabin. She then went to her spa appointment without giving his absence the second thought. At noon, Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate the disappearance of George. The captain reassured passengers that the investigation was necessary to understand what happened and hoped it would end quickly. The police began by questioning George's wife, Jennifer, who was visibly agitated and seemed to have limited information about her husband's disappearance. Jennifer told the police that she had last seen George the previous night and that Royal Caribbean staff had informed her that he may have fallen overboard. The discovery of blood on the boat's awning suggests that something terrible has happened to George. As a result, Jennifer became the main suspect due to her agitated state and apparent lack of knowledge about her husband's disappearance. The investigators then examined cabin 962, which was found to be in disarray, suggesting a possible struggle. In the bathroom, they discovered small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Furthermore, 2 small blood stains, each approximately 2 centimeters long, were found on the bedding. The blood samples were later identified as belonging to George. George's disappearance from the cabin remains a mystery, and all evidence points to the fact that he experienced trauma before he disappeared. A chair on the balcony, positioned to allow someone to sit next to the railing, caught the investigators' attention. Marks on the railing suggested someone had indeed sat there, sparking suspicion that George might have fallen. However, the high railing and bloodstains on the boat's awning and inside the cabin hinted at a more sinister scenario: murder. Investigators have been trying to determine who George was with that night, and what may have led to his disappearance. The inquiry was in its early stages, but it was already clear that the case was complex and fraught with mysteries. The Turkish authorities boarded the ship to investigate George Smith's disappearance. They began by questioning the group of friends with whom the newlyweds had spent the previous night. As the investigation remained shrouded in mystery, every detail was crucial. They reported that George and Jennifer had consumed excessive alcohol, leading to George's intoxication. They claimed to have helped him back to the cabin, put him to bed, and removed his shoes before leaving him alone. However, they were unable to account for Jennifer's whereabouts and assumed she had returned to the cabin later. Notably, Josh Askin's testimony contained inconsistencies. He alleged that Jennifer had left the group to go with a casino employee named Lloyd, contradicting the assumption that she had returned to the cabin. Josh Askin and Jennifer have deep feelings for each other, and they have both openly expressed their feelings for George. However, when reviewing the security footage, the story is different. At 3:30 a.m., the footage showed Jennifer leaving with new friends, while George stayed behind. Furthermore, data from Lloyd's key card indicated that he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., a fact confirmed by his girlfriend. This new information raised more questions and led investigators to suspect that Josh Askin may have been hiding some crucial details. As the investigation continues, each new revelation added more mystery to the story. On a different part of the ship, a young man named Greg Rosenberg was enjoying a family cruise with friends, including his cousin Zach Rosenberg and close friend Rostislav Kaufman. The 3 men, who all held American passports despite their Russian heritage, lived in New York City. Greg Rosenberg and Jennifer had started their evening at the casino, trying their luck at poker together. After the casino closed at 2:30 a.m., they joined their friends and decided to continue the party. The group headed to the ship's disco, where they danced and drank together, enjoying each other's company. Lloyd Bota, the casino manager, was also seen having a good time with the young men. The witnesses' accounts of the nighttime activities start to conflict with one another as the group members disperse to their cabins. It was already late, and they were visibly intoxicated. According to the ship's rules, passengers who were loud and behaved inappropriately would have their drink delivery blocked. When the staff refused to serve their drunk visitors, they remembered they had a bottle of absinthe they had bought on the island of Mykonos. However, the crew had forbidden passengers from consuming their own alcohol on board. Josh Askin returned to his cabin to retrieve a special bottle of wormwood wine that he said he had purchased earlier. It was later discovered that this absinthe was exceptionally strong, with an alcohol concentration of over 70%, making it one of the strongest drinks available. George decided to help his friend by hiding the bottle of absinthe in his shorts. However, an observant janitor noticed something unusual. A group of young men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, Josh Askin, and George, were drinking from the bottle. This incident was added to the investigation. That evening, not only the men were intoxicated. Jennifer, at first very alert and calm, then showed signs of intoxication. She began to stagger and at one point, leaned on Lloyd, the casino manager. Some thought she was trying to regain her balance, while others interpreted it as flirting. What happened next between Jennifer and George remains unclear. According to eyewitness accounts, they got into an argument, but it's unknown if they were joking or serious. At some point, Jennifer hit George, and it's unclear if it was playful or out of anger. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., visibly intoxicated and stumbling. George stayed behind with his new friends. The staff's testimony was crucial in uncovering what happened next. Jennifer's unsteady walk caught the attention of the janitor, who had seen her and her friends drinking earlier. He helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right when she reached her deck. However, this is where the story takes a confusing turn. Her stateroom was on the left, but she headed in the opposite direction. Jennifer was found asleep in a hallway far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock read 4:52 a.m. But her husband George was not there. The curtains on the balcony doors were closed tightly and remained still despite the breeze, raising questions about whether George had gone out to the balcony on his own after his friends left him in bed. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife were in a neighboring cabin. They were awakened at 4 a.m. by a noise and heard loud sounds coming from George's stateroom, number 9062. Chit Hyman reported the noise to guest services and also yelled through the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. The noise stopped briefly, but then loud talking resumed for about 3 minutes. An argument on the balcony followed, during which someone said, "Good night," repeatedly, as if trying to make people leave. After that, there were sounds of furniture being moved, and finally a loud thud, like something had fallen. Chit Hyman decided to investigate a disturbance and opened the door to find 3 unidentified men. Other passengers also reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the boat's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the eyewitnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. According to witnesses, 4 young men entered the cabin, but only 3 of them were visible when they exited. This raised the question of whether one of them might have stayed inside to search for money from the newlywed couple, who had recently won a significant amount at the casino. The theory of a failed robbery attempt seems plausible, but there are inconsistencies in the alibis of the 3 boys, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav. They claimed to have been in another stateroom just minutes after Heyman saw the three unknown men. The key card records for George's stateroom confirm that they entered it at 4:05 a.m., but there is no record of them entering the cabin again. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. Another theory suggests that George and Jennifer's drunkenness was not simply due to excessive alcohol consumption. Although they appeared relatively sober when they left the casino at 2:30 a.m., they were unable to return to their cabin on their own by 3:30 a.m., implying possible exposure to illicit substances. This idea is supported by the testimony of other casino visitors, who reported that George and Jennifer openly discussed having large sums of money, possibly from wedding gifts or casino winnings. Estimates of their wealth varied, but all witnesses agreed it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. The fact that George wore an expensive Breitling watch and Jennifer owned a valuable engagement ring further suggested they were wealthy. It's possible that their quarters were targeted by thieves searching for the money they had been boasting about. Two possible explanations have been proposed for the disappearance of George. The first theory suggests that the kidnapper may have injured George while trying to remove his valuable watch, resulting in bloodstains on the sheet. The second theory focuses on the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. After discovering that the passengers had been drinking and finding footprints on the balcony, the captain suspected that an accidental fall overboard might have occurred during a scuffle. Particular attention has been paid to hallucinations caused by drinking wormwood wine, a beverage containing the active ingredient thujone. However, toxicology experts note that the concentration of thujone plays a crucial role in determining its effects. Importantly, absinthe sold in European countries today is strictly regulated, and the thujone concentration is limited to such a low level that it is incapable of causing hallucinations. The fact that the George actually purchased the wormwood wine in Europe makes it unlikely that it caused the hallucinations, as experts claim that the amount of alcohol required to produce such hallucinations would have to be extremely large. In reality, only black market absinthe with a much higher concentration could potentially cause hallucinations. In the investigation into George Smith's disappearance, the FBI conducted polygraph interviews with Jennifer and Lloyd Bota, and who both passed. However, Joshua Skin failed the polygraph, which may suggest that he is hiding something about George's disappearance. The investigation into George's mysterious death uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a videotape featuring three individuals, including Russians, making jokes about an incident. The FBI agents reviewed this tape, and a particular comment made by one of the men, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," suggests a potential connection to George's case. During the investigation in 2009, FBI agents interviewed Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Joshua Skin as witnesses. However, Zach Rosenberg and Joshua Skin declined to provide a direct answer. Their answers remained vague, implying that they did not want to share full details of what happened. Another crucial witness was Greg Rosenberg, who was with the group of men entertaining on the night of the incident. He claimed they ordered food to their cabin that evening, providing a possible alibi for the Russian men. Nevertheless, inconsistencies were found in this statement. However, this information is incorrect. According to the ship's service records, their cabin was blocked from service that day. Staff were also specifically instructed not to serve the group that evening. Greg could not confidently say which passenger in the cabin had ordered food. Witnesses offered differing opinions on the nature of George and Jennifer's relationship, citing various observations and recollections. Greg believed it was challenging to gauge the quality of their relationship due to the group's heavy drinking. According to him, everyone in the group was extremely intoxicated, making it hard to determine the specifics of their interactions. There was a discrepancy in testimony as to whether Greg left the cabin immediately after ordering food. Joshua Skin provided information that Greg left the cabin after ordering food. However, Greg denied this statement, saying that he never left. This contradiction complicated the investigation, requiring further investigation to establish the facts. In December 2019, Greg Rosenberg was murdered, and the case remains unsolved. Investigators are exploring a potential connection between his death and that of George Smith. The mysterious circumstances surrounding George Smith's appearance have raised significant questions about his background and family. As details emerged, the situation grew increasingly complicated, with the actions of his relatives following the tragedy drawing scrutiny from both the public and law enforcement. The George family persisted in seeking answers and justice regarding George's disappearance. The case was moved from the FBI's Connecticut office to the New York office. The family offered a $100,000 reward for any information that could help identify and bring to justice those responsible for the crime. They also called for a boycott of the shipping company, which they believed was trying to cover up the incident to protect its profits. The incident also strained the relationship between George's parents and his young wife, Jennifer. Her behavior was closely scrutinized and many found her composure suspicious. She said she was acting on the orders of FBI agents, doing exactly as they told her. However, her hesitation to provide more information sparked suspicion. The George family, who were seeking truth and justice, became disheartened when Jennifer agreed to a $1 million settlement offer from the judgment company. This move appeared to them as a betrayal. They felt the Turkish authorities' investigation lacked transparency, and Jennifer seemed too hasty in accepting the offer, fueling their suspicions that she was concealing information and wasn't invested in uncovering the truth. In contrast, Jennifer says she has very few memories of what happened after 2:30 a.m. that night, unaware that the liner's staff had even found her in the corridor and escorted her back to her cabin. This satisfied with the Turkish investigation. The George family to take matters into their own hands by engaging independent forensic scientist Henry Lee to assist them. Henry Lee conducted a series of studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. These studies could have revealed crucial information about the events surrounding George's death and potentially confirmed one of their main theories: murder or accident. According to Henry Lee, the height of the balcony makes it unclear whether George's fall was an accident or not. It is possible that a third party pushed him or that he was in a state of insanity and climbed onto a chair before falling. Henry Lee had planned to conduct an experiment to simulate a fall from the balcony, but the cruise line owner refused to allow it. George's relatives believe that this decision was made to obstruct their efforts to uncover the truth. Henry Lee also conducted investigations in the cabin, on the balcony, and on the boat, but the results of these investigations were not made public. Meanwhile, the FBI launched its own investigation, but many of its findings and discoveries were kept secret. The FBI's investigation into George Smith's disappearance focused on 4 young men who spent the night with him, as well as 3 Russians, Greg, Zach Rosenberg, and Rostislav Kaufman. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the mystery and confusion surrounding the case. Initially, Jennifer was a suspect, but she was eventually cleared of suspicion. The family then increased the amount of their lawsuit against the company and used the payout to secure the release of the investigation's results, including witness statements and other relevant information. Jennifer was left to cherish the memories of George and dedicated herself to charitable work in his honor. She later remarried, continuing to strive to make a positive impact in his memory. The FBI launched an extensive investigation into George Smith's disappearance, but it was ultimately unable to uncover the truth about his fate or recover his body. Due to lack of evidence, the case was eventually closed, and his death was officially classified as an accident. George's family continues to seek answers about the circumstances surrounding his death, and not being able to visit his grave and pay their respects is the greatest suffering for them. They remain hopeful that the truth will eventually come to light, bringing closure to the case. Hello friends! welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shibli Sadiq Hridoy. Bangladesh's 18-year-old Sadiq was a very good boy, honest and hardworking, but his honesty cost him his life. Sadiq's full name was Shibli Sadiq Hridoy, and he was only 18 years old. He was born in Chattogram City, Bangladesh, which is one of the world's oldest seaports with active natural harbors for centuries. Sadiq belonged to a very poor family, where his father Shafiq was a truck driver and his mother, Naheda Kar, was a housewife. Sadiq was their only child. Since childhood, Sadiq had a great passion for studying and had big dreams for his life. To fulfill his dreams, he started working at a poultry farm at a very young age. The money his father earned was barely enough to cover their household expenses. So Sadiq started working at a nearby poultry farm to pay for his college fees. Sadiq quickly became skilled in his work, and the owner of the poultry farm promoted him directly from a regular worker to a manager. Even after receiving this position, Sadiq showed no signs of arrogance and continued to work diligently. During his time at the poultry farm, Sadiq had managed to save some money for his college fees and had also made several friends there, who were all older than him by 5 to 6 years. But they all respected Sadiq and worked under him because he was educated and took his work as a manager seriously. He also ensured that others worked honestly while on duty. However, sometimes due to Sadiq's honesty, there would be conflicts with his own friends at the farm. Although these conflicts were not major and were usually resolved within the farm premises. Besides his work and studies, Sadiq had no other distractions. If he ever had any urgent work, he managed it well and always made it home on time before it got too dark. On the morning of August 28, 2023, Sadiq went to work and performed his usual duties, just like any other day. However, that evening, he did not return home on time as expected. At first, his parents assumed that he had been given some important task at the poultry farm where he worked. But as time went by, their concern grew. Between 11:30 and 12 at night, his parents tried calling him 2 or 3 times, but Sadiq did not answer any of their calls, which was highly unusual for him. Although Sadiq didn't answer his parents' calls, they were still thinking positively as the night passed. However, Sadiq still hadn't returned home the next morning. Sadiq's parents tried calling their son once again, but he didn't answer this time either. They also tried calling the owner of the poultry farm, but his phone was also unreachable. Sadiq's parents searched around their home and also asked people near the poultry farm about their son, but no one knew anything about Sadiq. Since they couldn't find any information about Sadiq from anywhere, they started to worry a lot. Amidst this worry, on the morning of the 29th, they received a call from Sadiq's number. Seeing this, Sadiq's parents felt a little relieved. However, as soon as they answered the call, they sensed that their son sounded quite panicked. Sadiq then told his mother that he had been kidnapped and had been inside a car for the last 12 hours. He said his captors were beating him and that he was hiding and talking to his mother in their presence. But the call suddenly got disconnected before Sadiq could speak further to his mother. Now after this, Sadiq's parents knew that their son had been kidnapped and he was in quite a bit of trouble. The kidnapper himself cut Sadiq's phone, and Sadiq was the sole heir of his family, which is why his parents were very worried about him. It was because of this attention that Sadiq's mother, Naheda Kar, started calling her son again, but now someone was disconnecting the call from the other end. After this, she was about to go to the police to file a complaint when she received another call from the same number, but this time it wasn't Sadiq, but a stranger speaking. The person on the other end said that they had Sadiq in their custody and that if the family wanted his safety, they should arrange 1.5 million taka quickly. The location to deliver the money would be given on the next call. Sadiq's family was very poor. They didn't even have 1 lakh taka, but because it was a matter of their only son's life, they started gathering money. For the next 3 days, they put all their efforts into collecting money. They asked for money from their relatives and neighbors, but from the 28th to the 31st, they couldn't even gather 2 lakh taka, let alone 1.5 million taka. On August 31st, 2023, the kidnappers contacted Sadiq's parents again and demanded money. This time, Sadiq's parents told the kidnappers directly that they could not gather that much money. After hearing Sadiq's parents' response, the kidnappers compromised and said they would release Sadiq if the parents brought them 2 lakh taka quickly. It was unusual for kidnappers to act this way, but it seemed as if they were already aware of Sadiq's family's financial situation. The kidnappers had already reduced the ransom amount to 200,000 taka. But even then, Sadiq's parents told the kidnappers that 200,000 taka is also too much for their family. In response, the kidnapper said, "Okay, but if you don't give us the full amount, then we will kill Sadiq." After hearing this, Sadiq's parents said, "Don't harm our son. We need a 4-day extension to gather 200,000 taka." Now, Sadiq's parents also borrowed money from shopkeepers to gather the remaining amount. Some people understood their compulsion and gave them money, but some couldn't. However, after wandering everywhere, they managed to gather 200,000 Bangladeshi taka within 3 days. And now they were just waiting for the kidnappers' call. On September 4th, in the afternoon, the kidnappers called and summoned Sadiq's father to the Bandarbon district headquarters with the money. Additionally, they threatened again that if he disclosed anything to the police, Sadiq would not be alive. Now, since Sadiq's parents wanted to save their son, they did not take any risks and went directly to the location specified by the kidnappers, paying them the ransom. There, Sadiq's father waited for a while. Then 2 masked kidnappers arrived. They didn't talk much to Sadiq's father and just took the money from him. However, as the kidnappers were leaving, they assured Sadiq's father that his son would reach home before him. Hearing this, Sadiq's father was immensely relieved and hurried home, but upon reaching, he found that Sadiq hadn't arrived yet. He asked his wife about their son's whereabouts, and upon hearing this, Nahita became anxious. Subsequently, Sadiq's father shared everything with his wife. After hearing the entire story, Sadiq's mother became even more anxious, yet both of them waited outside their home's door until evening, hoping for Sadiq's return. By now, the night had fallen, and they hadn't received any further information about Sadiq. Similarly, this night passed, and by then, Sadiq's parents had lost all hope, and their condition had deteriorated to tears. Up until now, even Sadiq's relatives had learned about his disappearance, and one of those relatives advised Shafiq to lodge a complaint with the police. Initially, Sadiq's father was also afraid, because the kidnappers had warned him that if he tried to tell the police anything, they would harm Sadiq. But then, on September 7th, Sadiq's father called his son's phone, although the kidnappers had forbidden it, but there was no response. By August 28th to September 7th, Sadiq had been missing for more than 10 days, and things were getting quite difficult. So on the evening of September 7th, Sadiq's parents decided to go to the local police station. There, they recounted everything that had happened over the past 10 days to the police. Initially, upon hearing all this, the police were quite angry with Sadiq's parents for not informing them of the incident first. But when Sadiq's parents mentioned the threat given by the kidnappers, the police understood what a parent must be going through at such a tough time. After that, the police quickly assembled a team to search for Sadiq and began their search. During the investigation, the police first checked Sadiq's background, such as his behavior in college, his friends, and how he lived with his family. It was revealed that Sadiq was a good boy who neither had enmity with anyone, nor did he engage in fights with anyone. However, during the police investigation, Sadiq's mother, Nahida Khan, remembered something. Before moving forward, she told the police about a fight Sadiq had with his friends inside the poultry farm. Upon hearing this, the police immediately went to the poultry farm and apprehended 6 workers who were working there. Each of them was interrogated one by one. In the initial investigation, These people tried to prove themselves innocent, but in the end, when the police pressured them, 4 out of the 6 boys confessed to their crime. The names of these 4 boys were Umongching Mama, Suing Mama, Anumara, and Ukai Mara. The police arrested these 4 on charges of kidnapping. During the investigation, the police asked all of them about Sadiq's location, but none of them uttered a single word. However, after being kept in jail and tortured for quite some time, they opened their mouths and also revealed about their other 2 accomplices. On September 11th, they began to recount how, on the night of August 28th, when Sadiq was returning home, they kidnapped him to take revenge. Their plan was to kidnap Sadiq, beat him, and then demand money from his parents in exchange for releasing him. Initially, everything was going according to plan, and these people were going to get the money. However, during this time, Sadiq saw the faces of 2 of them, which made them think that Sadiq now knew everything. Therefore, they thought that if they let Sadiq go, he would inform the police, and they would be caught. So after that, they used a knife to attack Sadiq and attacked him repeatedly from his face to his feet with that knife. As a result, Sadiq bled a lot and died on the spot. Now, the police and Sadiq's family had learned that Sadiq was no longer alive. The police are investigating this case as a murder case. After that, the police asked these people about Sadiq's body, to which his killers replied that after killing Sadiq, they had cut his body into pieces and thrown it on a hill. The police went with these people to that hill and found some body parts there. But among those pieces, the police found a proper body a little far away, but its face was completely disfigured. The face of that body was so badly disfigured that the police couldn't identify whether it was Sadiq or someone else. However, after looking at the clothes on that body, its height, and some other factors, the police believed that it was Sadiq's body. Sadiq's family confirmed that yes, this was indeed their son. Now the police had arrested all of them on murder charges, and during custody, Umongching Mara made several revelations in the Sadiq murder case. He stated that he had a good friendship with Sadiq, but 2 months ago they had a disagreement over some issues. After that, Umongching decided to take revenge on Sadiq. Additionally, he mentioned in his statement that he himself had killed Sadiq with his own hands and even ate small pieces of his body. Afterward, this was a horrifying and shameful act. But as soon as this news appeared in the media, protests started across the country. During this time, people couldn't tolerate their anger, and when the police were taking all these accused on the evening of September 11th, the crowd snatched Umongching from the police and beat him so severely that he died on the spot before the court could sentence him. People themselves gave him the punishment for his deeds. Moreover, the police managed to remove all the other accused with great difficulty and put them behind bars. Since then, there have been no updates on this case. If any new update comes in this case, I will inform you through a community post on my channel. However, Sadiq's parents lost a son who loved them dearly and was very serious about his future. So with this, the Shibli Sadiq Hridoy murder case comes to a close. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Rena Verk. On the fateful date of November 14th, 1997, the vibrant life of 14-year-old Rena Verk met a heartbreaking and tragic end. A group of her peers had lured her to a party where they had orchestrated a sinister plot against her. As the night unfolded, her absence raised concern among her family, triggering an unsettling realization that she hadn't returned home, and no one could account for her departure from the ill-fated gathering. They reported her missing, but initially, the police did little to locate her due to her history as a runaway and her past troublesome behaviors. Tragically, her lifeless body was eventually discovered, and the dark truth behind her death would be uncovered by the investigators. Rena Verk was born on March 10, 1983, in Saanich, a district municipality on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada. She came from an extended family that traced its roots back to India. Rena's mother, Suman, hailed from an Indo-Canadian family, while her father, Manjit, was an immigrant from India. Reena's parents underwent a religious conversion from Hinduism and started embracing the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses, despite being part of the Saanich community where there was a prevalent schism among Indo-Canadians. Growing up, Reena struggled with the persistent awareness of being an outsider, yearning for acceptance from her peers. Sadly, she became the target of relentless bullying due to her unconventional appearance and ethnic background in a predominantly white school. Her non-mainstream looks, combined with being overweight and having brown skin, set her apart, exacerbating her challenges. Reena also faced the burden of adhering to her parents' strict religious principles, a stark contrast to her peers who were starting to explore newfound freedom from parental control. Concerns heightened when her parents discovered the prolonged bullying she had endured since starting school. They suspected this may have taken a toll on her mental well-being, leading her into depression. In May 1994, the family relocated, and Reena transferred from Burnside Elementary School. Her parents hoped this move would end the persistent bullying, and initially it seemed to be working. Reena's spirits had been lifted, and she even forged a new friendship that brought her considerable joy. However, this positive turn took a downturn when the newfound friends shunned her and distanced themselves, reigniting the cycle of bullying. In 1996, Reena completed her elementary education and enrolled at Colquitt's Middle School. There, she befriended a group of peers she considered the cool kids. This group disregarded curfews, consumed alcohol, and smoked, embodying the freedom that Reena craved, a liberation from her strict parents and their religious rules. Although Reena felt accepted by her new social circle, her parents disapproved, leading to an increase in her rebellious conduct. In this turbulent phase, Reena's father, Manjit, recalled imparting a piece of wisdom to his daughter, saying, "Bad associations spoil useful habits." In 1996, at the age of 13, Reena received some advice from a friend, suggesting a way to leave her home. The friend proposed that she could enter foster care by informing the police of alleged physical assault. Acting on this advice, Reena reported her parents for assault, but no charges were filed due to insufficient evidence. Consequently, she was temporarily removed from her family and resided with her grandparents, who believed her account. Taking a troubling turn, Reena falsely accused her father of sexual assault in 1997, causing significant trauma to him. Her father faced arrest on charges of sexually assaulting Reena, leading to his incarceration awaiting a trial. Ultimately, her father's charges were dismissed when she confessed to fabricating the assault allegations. Expressing discomfort in her grandparents' home, Reena was then relocated to the foster home where she wanted to go. There, she formed connections and began mimicking her newfound friends, who often smoked and always discussed gangs, where she even falsely claimed to be affiliated with one. After a while, Reena realized that living in a foster home did not meet her expectations, as she still had responsibilities and a curfew. Therefore, she apologized to her parents and returned home. Later on, she decided to leave her parents' house again, choosing to stay in a youth shelter before eventually being placed in government care. Over the following months, she found herself caught in a cycle, moving between her parents' home, foster care, and youth shelters. This tumultuous relationship with her parents, social workers, and government officials portrayed the struggles of a bewildered teenager. Desiring acceptance and friendship, she saw her strict religious upbringing and overprotective parents as outdated or culturally disconnected. She seemed willing to go to great lengths to gain peer approval. Middle school was the most confusing and emotionally draining period of her life. In his 2008 book, Reena, A Father's Story, Manjit Virk detailed the family's anguish in dealing with their daughter, expressing his belief that Reena manipulated social workers and family members. He lamented the lack of belief in their side of the story and the widespread acceptance of Reena's narratives. Reena, yearning for acceptance from those who had previously rejected her, eagerly sought their approval. The invitation to a party on November 14, 1997, likely stirred excitement in her, as it presented an opportunity to socialize with the cool kids. The event initially took place during an overnight stay with her parents behind a Saanich school, but was later relocated to the nearby Craigflower Bridge after police intervention. Unfortunately, the party did not unfold as Rena had envisioned. At 10:40 p.m., just 20 minutes before her curfew, Rena reached out to her parents, informing them that she was on her way home. Tragically, this phone call was the last time Rena's parents would communicate with her. At the Craigflower Bridge, a group of teenagers were consuming marijuana and alcohol. Suddenly, several girls affiliated with a gang called the Shoreline Six targeted Rena. They subjected her to a brutal assault, physically beating her, placing a lit cigarette on her forehead, and even trying to set her hair on fire. The attack continued until one of the girls intervened and ordered the others to stop. Witnesses noted that the assault seemed unprovoked. After the initial attack was halted, Rena attempted to flee and return home, but two teenagers, 15-year-old Kelly Ard and 16-year-old Warren Glowatsky, chased after her. They dragged Rena to the other side of the Craigflower Bridge, where the violent assault continued with punches and kicks. Tragically, they submerged her head underwater until she succumbed to her injuries. Following her death, they removed her sweater and shoes, then pushed her lifeless body into the water. Growing increasingly worried as Rena did not return home by her curfew, her parents initially assumed she might have spent the night at her grandparents' house, but she was not there. She was also not the group home. They contacted one of Rena's friends, who revealed that she was still at the party when the friend left around 11 p.m. The next day, Rena's family reported her missing, but the police response was slower due to her history of running away, which was attributed to her past behavior. Rumors about a severe beating and a body found in the nearby gorge waterway circulated among the students at Central Intermediate School, where the teenagers involved attended. The members of the Shoreline Six group, aware of the situation, maintained a code of silence, vowing not to betray each other. Despite the prevalent rumors, an eyewitness eventually came forward to the police, stating that she had seen Kelly and Warren follow Rena after the beating. Surprisingly, a week passed before a police investigation was initiated, after Rena was reported missing. Despite numerous witnesses and teachers hearing rumors about the incident, for some unknown reasons, none had reported the information to the police. Instead, it took a student coming forward as a witness to prompt police involvement on November 21, 1997. Glowatsky and Elard were arrested and charged with murder and aggravated assault. The members of the Shoreline Six faced aggravated assault charges, but their identities remained unknown and protected under Canada's Young Offenders Act. On November 22nd, a police helicopter flew over the Craig-FL Bridge area, but no signs were observed until a ground search was conducted. The search revealed a body concealed in weeds, later identified as that of the missing teenager, Rena Verk. The forensic pathologist determined that drowning was the cause of death. Subsequent autopsy findings disclosed that Rena had sustained a significant injury with head injuries, severe enough to have been fatal, even without drowning at the time of her tragic demise. Rena was just 14 years old. In February 1998, the 6 girls involved in the initial attack on Rena were prosecuted in youth court, and as stated earlier, their identities remained shielded from the public. 3 of the girls admitted guilt to the charge of assault causing bodily harm, while the other 3 underwent a trial and were subsequently convicted of the same offense. Sentences varied, ranging from a 60-day conditional sentence to 1 year in jail. As for Elard and Glowatsky, who were charged with Rena's murder, they faced a different legal process. Despite their ages, they were tried in adult court due to the severe nature of the crime. Warren Glowatsky had experienced a challenging upbringing, marked by the absence of his alcoholic mother for a significant part of his life. Around the time of Rena's murder, he had found himself residing at a friend's house, following his father's departure from British Columbia to live in California without him. In April 1999, Glowacki's trial commenced, and by June of the same year, he was found guilty of second-degree murder, resulting in a life sentence. As a minor at the time of the crime, he was eligible for parole after serving 7 years in prison. During his incarceration, Glowacki discovered his Métis heritage, allowing him to involve tribal elders in his parole process. This process included various restorative justice measures, involving meeting with Rena's family. In July 2006, he received unescorted temporary absences from jail and was ultimately released on full parole in June 2010. Rena's family did not oppose the parole request, as they believed Glowacki demonstrated genuine remorse for his actions. In stark contrast, Kelly Ard hailed from a more stable and traditional family that provided support during the trial. She was 15 years old at the time of Rena's murder. Despite her lawyer's request to have her case tried in youth court, the Supreme Court of Canada rejected this plea due to the level of violence involved in the crime and an apparent lack of remorse. Initially convicted of second-degree murder in March 2000, her conviction was overturned in January 2003 on grounds of an unfair trial. Released on bail while awaiting her appeal, Ard had served 18 months of her life sentence. However, during this period of release pending a new trial, she faced charges of assault causing bodily harm for beating a 58-year-old woman in a Vancouver park. Her bail was revoked, and she was returned to prison by March 2004. In June 2004, Kelly Ard faced a new trial. Witnesses testified that she had boasted about being responsible for Rena's death. Glowacki claimed that he had witnessed Ard drowning Rena, but Ard's lawyer questioned Glowacki's credibility, highlighting alleged inconsistencies in his initial statements to the police and during the trial. Throughout her trial, Ard admitted to assaulting Rena, claiming it was in defense of her friends, as she thought that Rena was going to hurt them. She vehemently denied committing murder, shifting the blame and asserting that Glowacki and 2 other girls were the ones responsible for Rena's death. Ard expressed a resigned acceptance of an impending conviction, stating, "I'm obviously going to be convicted. You've got what you want. My life is ruined." Ard showed no remorse for her actions and failed to disclose the motive behind the planned attack. After deliberating for 5 days, the jury reached an impasse, leading to a mistrial declared by the judge in July 2004. In February 2005, Kelly Ard faced a new trial with Glowacki once again serving as the key witness. Glowacki reiterated his testimony, affirming that he and Ard had assaulted Rena, leaving her lifeless in the water, on April 12, 2005. Ard was convicted for the second time of second-degree murder and received a life sentence with no chance of parole for 7 years. However, in September 2008, the British Columbia Court of Appeal overturned Ard's second-degree murder conviction, ordering a 4th trial on the grounds that the judge in her 3rd trial had provided incorrect instructions to the jury regarding the testimony presented in the case. This legal saga finally concluded in June 2009, when the Supreme Court of Canada upheld her conviction for second-degree murder, putting an end to the prolonged legal proceedings. In 2017, Ard was granted day parole, and by 2019 she received additional privileges such as overnight leaves and extended day parole. The Parole Board of Canada approved the continuation of Ard's day parole, a decision that drew significant media attention on July 14, 2020, as Ard, who had initially received a life sentence, was now serving time on day parole. During her time on parole, Ard changed her name to Kerry Sim, started a family with her spouse, and had 2 children. She adhered to the conditions of her parole, including abstaining from alcohol and drugs, and maintaining no contact with Rena's family. The lingering question throughout this time revolved around the motive behind the teenager's decision to beat up Rena and end up murdering her. One supposed reason was revenge. Rena had previously lived in a group home with two of the girls involved in the assault, who accused her of stealing her phone book and making calls while spreading rumors. Another girl claimed she harbored resentment towards Rena for allegedly stealing her boyfriend in the year 2000. When Rena's parents took legal action against the teenagers involved, as well as the British Columbia government and other parties, Rena's father stated, "Society doesn't hold people accountable for their actions. This is one way to make them responsible." In 2012, Rena's mother addressed her daughter's tragic death and the detrimental impact of bullying on young individuals. She shared, "For a long time, we were consumed with the legal aspects of dealing with our murdered child, the courts prolonging the cases, and it's as if you had to put your feelings and your grief on hold. I'm finding that now I'm feeling more of the impact of losing Rena, the emotions and feelings. So actually I'm struggling more now and missing her more." Rena's parents started anti-bullying campaigns and inclusion programs in response to the tragedy. They pushed the government to implement anti-bullying measures in schools. Through their persistent efforts, the government introduced an anti-bullying program in recognition of their impactful advocacy. Rena's parents were awarded the Anthony J. Hume Award of Distinction in 2009 for their dedication to crime prevention and community safety. It is indeed sad what Rena endured until her end. Though her actions were troubling, they're somewhat understandable given typical teenage yearnings to belong, which can have both good and bad results. Despite the hardships, her family continued to love her even after the false charges and awful acts blamed on them. Their love persisted as they only wished for her well-being. Our deepest condolences go to the life lost too early and the grieving family she left behind. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sarah Everard. Sarah Everard was born in June 1987 to Jeremy Everard and Susan Everard. Her father worked as a professor of electronics at the University of York, England, United Kingdom, and her mother worked in charity. She was the youngest of 3 children in the family, with older siblings James Everard and Catherine Everard. The family home was located in a quiet cul-de-sac in the Heslington area of the city, and Sarah would often be seen playing in the street with her siblings and other local children. She attended the local comprehensive Fulford School in 2005, where she was remembered as an incredibly likable, vibrant, caring and popular girl who excelled at sports and performed well academically. After completing her A-levels, she left Fulford School in 2005 after securing a place at Durham University, where she studied for a degree in human geography and graduated in 2008. Sarah started her career as an account executive at Proximity London in July 2008, where she worked for 4 months. After that, she joined Rapier as a senior account manager in September 2009. She worked there for 3 years and 6 months before leaving to work at a travel agency. From February 2021, Sarah has been working as a digital account director at McCormack & Morrison, as well as a freelance client lead at Flipside Group, a freelance company. On the evening of 3rd March 2021, Sarah was walking home to Brixton Hill from a friend's house near Clapham Common. Unfortunately, something terrible happened. The following day, Sarah's boyfriend, Josh, reported her disappearance to the police. They were supposed to meet, but she didn't show up and didn't respond to any of his calls. Her family and friends were shocked as she was in regular contact with them, and it was completely out of character for her to disappear like that. A large-scale search operation was launched, involving hundreds of officers and members of the public. The search concentrated on the area between Clapham and Brixton, including parks, woodlands, and other open spaces where CCTV footage had captured Sarah's presence the previous night. Police stated that she was believed to have walked through Clapham Common after leaving her friend's flat and heading towards her home in Brixton. a journey that should have taken approximately 50 minutes. The police issued a public appeal for information, requesting anyone who had witnessed Sarah or had any relevant information that could assist the investigation to come forward. They released footage captured from the dashcam of a passing police car and a private doorbell-type camera, which showed Sarah walking alone along the A205 Pointers Road towards Tulse Hill, south of Brixton. She spoke to her boyfriend on her phone for around 15 minutes and agreed to meet him the following day. It was uncertain whether she made it home. The police also released a photo of Sarah and a description of her attire when she was last seen. She was wearing a green rain jacket, navy blue trousers with a white diamond pattern, and turquoise and orange sneakers. It was believed that she was also wearing green earphones and a white beanie hat. The investigation was led by the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Crime Command, which deployed over 120 officers and staff to work on the case. The search was conducted with the assistance of police dogs, helicopters, and specialist search teams. Specialist officers were brought in from across the force, and the police received more than 120 calls from the public regarding the case. They asked anyone who may have relevant dashcam or other footage to come forward. Sniffer dogs searched gardens in streets around the search site near Everard's presumed route home and in the nearby Oaklands estate. Officers also searched a pond in Clapham Common and drains along the A205. Investigators quickly found CCTV footage showing a police officer from the force's Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, later identified as Wayne Couzens, with Sarah Everard on 2 occasions. The footage depicted them next to a rented Vauxhall Astra, along with the car's license plate. It was discovered that on the 28th February 2021, Couzens had reserved a white Vauxhall car from a rental company in Dover. On the 3rd March, after finishing a 12-hour shift at the US Embassy in London, he travelled to Kent to pick up the rented vehicle. Subsequently, he drove back to London, where he was seen in Earl's Court and on Battersea Bridge. Upon reaching Clapham, he drove to Earl's Court again before returning to Clapham around the time Sarah Everard went missing. Couzens had parked the Vauxhall on the pavement outside Pointers Court, stopped Everard, and showed her his police warrant card before handcuffing her. Around that time, Couzens and Everard entered the car, and Couzens drove to Kent, where the route of the car was retrospectively tracked using CCTV and ANPR. Couzens and Everard were again spotted in Dover, and had transferred to Couzens' personal seat car. Couzens then drove to Hodes Wood near Ashford, where his car was captured on CCTV in the area between 3:22 and 6:32, before driving back to Dover to switch back into his rental car before returning it. The Metropolitan Police then arrested Wayne Couzens, along with a woman, at an address in Kent in connection with Everard's disappearance, and they were taken into custody. However, the woman was later released without charge as the detectives continued their investigation. They found that Couzens had told senior colleagues that he was suffering from stress and no longer wanted to carry a gun. Couzens bought and filled a petrol container at a service station in Whitfield and then drove to Hodes Wood, where his car was captured on CCTV at 12:37. He reported himself ill from work, handing in his equipment, including his police belt and handcuffs, which raised suspicions of murder. The police searched Hodes Wood and found human remains that were confirmed to be Everard's body through dental records. Her remains were found in a large builder's bag, approximately 100 meters from a plot of land that Couzens owned. The police also searched the site of a former body repair garage previously owned by Couzens' family at the top of the White Cliffs. The detectives questioned Couzens and learned that when his mobile phone had connected to cell sites in the area of Clapham, where he had sexually assaulted Sarah and strangled her to death using his police duty belt, he burned Everard's body inside a refrigerator he had bought. He then bought 2 large builder bags from B&Q before returning to Hodes Wood, where he used one of the bags to dispose of Everard's remains in a pond. He drove his personal car to Sandwich, Kent, disposing of Everard's mobile phone, where the police divers searched underwater in one of the town's watercourses. The police also focused their search operation around the rope walk in Sandwich and cordoned off approximately 1 square mile of the town. Sarah's disappearance and the heartbreaking discovery of her remains drew people from all walks of life together in grief and solidarity. The call for change echoed through the streets as individuals raised their voices to demand a safer world for women. Sarah, a vibrant and compassionate soul, was a beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Her disappearance left her loved ones devastated and searching for answers in a world where her safety should have been guaranteed. The investigation concluded that Sarah Everard had died from compression of the neck, according to the results of a post-mortem held at William Harvey Hospital in Ashford. Cousins was charged with Everard's kidnapping and murder following authorization from the Crown Prosecution Service. He appeared at Westminster Magistrates' Court and was remanded in custody before appearing at the Old Bailey from Belmarsh Prison. Cousins pleaded guilty to kidnap and sexual assault and admitted responsibility for Everard's death on the 30th of September. Cousins was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order, with Fulford justifying the severity of the punishment by saying that Cousins' use of his position as a police officer to detain Everard was the vital factor that made the seriousness of this case exceptionally high. Cousins tried to apply for leave to appeal against his sentence, but his appeal against his whole life sentence was rejected by the Court of Appeal as of December 2021. Cousins was imprisoned at HM Prison Franklin in County Durham and was further charged with 4 counts of indecent exposure related to alleged incidents in January and February 2021. He pleaded guilty to 3 incidents of indecent exposure that took place in Kent in 2020 and 2021. Sarah's story has sparked important discussions about women's safety and empowerment, leading to various initiatives and advocacy movements, with the shared goal of creating a world where women can walk freely without fear. The global outcry for change following Sarah's tragedy calls for accountability, respect, and a shift in societal attitudes towards women's safety. We honor Sarah's memory by working towards a world where every woman can live without fear, where safety is a basic right, and where unity and empathy prevail. Sarah Everard's legacy will be one of strength, unity, and hope, inspiring us all to stand against violence, support women's rights, and strive for a world where everyone can live without fear. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970, at least one sibling, and an Indiana, United States upbringing. Hailing from a middle-class family, he was an entrepreneurial youth with a passion for independence, self-improvement, and a drive to succeed. Unsurprisingly, after high school, he sought ways to earn a living. According to his brother, his first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant, although his tenure was short-lived for unknown reasons. Undeterred, he soon found a new opportunity that offered greater autonomy and led him to discover his true calling, sales. John started his career as a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners, a path that initially drew mockery from his family. However, in a remarkably short period, John proved his doubters wrong, discovering his true calling in life. By the end of his first year, he had risen to become the top-performing salesman in the area, and he made it clear that he had no intention of stopping there. Putting in long hours, often exceeding 12 to 16 hours a day, John became not only a sales leader whose accomplishments were regularly recognized at company meetings, but also a mentor and inspiration to his fellow salespeople, who drew new ideas and motivation from him. During this time, John met 20-year-old Judy, a young woman from a low-income family of 3 children in Texas, born in October 1969. Judy was outgoing and confident, and despite John not being actively seeking new salespeople, she persuaded him that she excelled in sales. Though young, Judy was far from shy. In fact, she had already been married at 14 with her parents' consent, was divorced, and had 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks, by the time she met John. Impressed, John gave Judy a chance and became her mentor in vacuum cleaner sales. Not only did Judy earn a spot in John's sales force, but she also captured her boss's heart, and they eventually started a romantic relationship. John's life was thriving. As a renowned salesman and trainer, he had earned an excellent reputation, and Judy's support in both his personal and professional life was invaluable. With this solid foundation, he decided to take the leap and start his own business in Michigan, becoming a sales and service operator for Kirby vacuum cleaners. In addition, he offered training sessions for salespeople, sharing his personal secrets and infectious enthusiasm that had contributed to his success in the industry. John's company soon became one of the top performers in the area, a feat he always attributed to Judy's unwavering support. In 1992, with his professional life firmly established, John and Judy got married. The following years were dedicated to demonstrating the potential achievements of a successful salesperson. They had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica, adding to their family of 4. As their fortunes grew, they relocated to better residences, and their children began to reap the benefits of John and Judy's hard work. John initially got along well with his wife's children. Christina was a sweet and innocent girl, while Daniel was hyperactive and a bit mischievous. The Parkers had a comfortable life, with excellent schools for the kids, luxurious cars, and frequent vacations. John was building a substantial fortune and wanted to inspire the young salespeople he trained by showing them what they could achieve through hard work. However, Christina's choice of friends was concerning, as she hung out with kids who had behavioral issues and even drank with them. There were also rumors that she used drugs. Meanwhile, 13-year-old Daniel was heading down a troubled path, often appearing angry and poorly supervised. One incident involved Daniel taking John's car without permission and driving recklessly around the neighborhood, damaging many mailbox posts. The next day, John visited the affected homeowners to pay for the damages and avoid having Daniel reported to the police. Around the same time, John was summoned to Daniel's school to address a complaint about his bad behavior. Unfortunately, the encounter ended with John physically disciplining the boy, which created tension in their relationship. After 9 years together, Judy decided it was time to introduce her family to the humble Texas town where she grew up, and to reconnect with one of her brothers who still called it home. During their visit, Judy confided in her brother that her marriage was on the brink of collapse, and that John's behavior towards her children was a major concern. However, the reality was that Judy herself was failing to acknowledge her older children's wayward paths, instead siding with them, which only added fuel to the already volatile situation. John's situation went from bad to worse when he began to suspect that his wife was having an affair with one of his company's employees. As a man of action, John didn't let problems simmer. He addressed them head-on. To be certain of his suspicions, he installed cameras around the office and eventually gathered irrefutable evidence. This confirmation crushed John, and his friendly demeanor took a drastic turn for the worse. He started drinking excessively, which led to violent arguments with Judy and rough treatment of his children. One day, he brutally beat his daughter Tiffany with a belt after her teacher informed him that she had forgotten her homework. The teacher noticed the marks the next day and reported the incident to social services. Before they arrived, John warned the 4 kids that if they wanted to maintain their luxurious lifestyle, they needed to keep quiet about the beating. Tiffany ended up blaming her stepbrother Daniel, who didn't deny the accusations. John's bad mood didn't only affect his family, it also had a significant impact on his employees and the company's clients, who suffered from his outbursts of rage as a result of his wife's infidelity. In an attempt to separate his wife from her lover, John decided to relocate the family to to an exclusive area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite still loving Judy and hoping that by removing her from temptation, they could start anew, things didn't improve. Although Judy made an effort to improve her appearance by losing weight and changing her look, John, on the other hand, let his beard grow, started smoking, and his wardrobe became limited to jeans. His constant distraction led to the decline of the business, which almost went bankrupt, forcing him to sell his boat to stay afloat. Rumors spread throughout the office that Judy was having an affair with Jeff, John's right-hand man, although it was unclear whether the rumors were true or not. These rumors undoubtedly fueled more disagreements between they. At a certain point, Judy dropped a bombshell. She wanted a divorce, but John knew it wouldn't be that straightforward. He felt he had given Judy everything, rescuing her from poverty, embracing her children, lavishing her with luxuries, and loving her with an all-consuming passion. Now that same passion had curdled into bitter resentment. He retaliated by severing all her financial lifelines. He made it crystal clear, if she walked out, she'd leave with nothing. And he had the ultimate trump card, a recording of her illicit affair with a colleague. At the start of 2003, the strained relationship between John and Judy had taken its toll on their children, whose behavior continued to deteriorate. Tiffany's actions were particularly concerning, having recently been grounded for setting a fire on school grounds with a friend. The turning point came on Thursday, April 17, 2013, when John and Judy decided to have dinner alone at a restaurant, likely in an attempt to find a resolution to their marital issues, or, at the very least, ease the tension. After dining, they phoned home to check on the kids and informed them they would be back soon. Christina requested that they stop by her office to pick up a forgotten school notebook. On their way back, they made a detour to the office, and John took the opportunity to drop off the leftover dinner to Jeff, who was allegedly working late. They arrived at the office in a deserted industrial area just before 10 p.m. As John talked to Jeff inside, Judy retrieved her daughter's notebook and headed back to their car parked outside. Moments later, John emerged from the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side to search for something in the vehicle. Suddenly, two loud bangs echoed through the air, and John crumpled to the parking lot floor. Almost instantly, 911 operators received frantic calls from Judy and Jeff. Police and medical assistance units responded to the scene within minutes. Tragically, John, 33 years old, had been shot in the back of the head and was declared dead at the scene. When questioned, Judy, who was inside the car at the time of the incident, was unable to provide much insight. She stated that she had been sitting in the car when her husband emerged from the office, opened the back door on the driver's side, and immediately heard two shots. Judy recalled that upon hearing the gunfire, she instinctively hid, using the seat for cover, and when she finally looked up, she caught a glimpse of a dark-clad figure fleeing the scene. John's wallet was missing, leading investigators to initially suspect a robbery. However, as they delved deeper into the scene, doubts began to arise. Several questions troubled the investigators. Why would someone target this desolate industrial area at night, with no one around to witness the crime? If it were a robbery, why would the perpetrator take John's life first and then steal his wallet, when they could have easily taken the $20,000 gold Rolex he was wearing, as well as other accessible jewelry? And why didn't the thief search John's pockets, a common practice in such assaults? 2 bullet casings were recovered at the scene, corroborating Judy's account of hearing 2 explosions. One of the shots had killed John almost instantly, while the fate of the second remained unclear due to a lack of official information. With their minds racing with questions, the investigators launched their inquiry. And naturally, Judy was the first to be questioned. She revealed that her husband had a dispute with a company employee sometime prior and was able to identify the individual. However, beyond this, Judy was unable to provide any further insight beyond her initial statement at the scene. Jeff, likewise, proved unhelpful. He was inside the office and only emerged after hearing the shots, by which time everything was already over. Meanwhile, the authorities contacted the Parker residence, where Christina answered the call and was informed of her stepfather's passing. With the robbery motive all but dismissed, detectives shifted their focus to John's inner circle, starting with the disgruntled employee who had allegedly harbored resentment. The man acknowledged their intense argument, but claimed it had been amicably resolved, and his alibi checked out after a thorough investigation. The investigation subsequently cast a wide net, encompassing nearly everyone close to the young businessman: business partners, past and current employees, competitors, and even John's friends and family. The only somewhat suspect discovery was the interaction between the widow and the company's general manager, though it ultimately yielded no concrete evidence. Judy's demeanor at her husband's funeral was peculiar, to say the least. Observers noted that she seemed cheerful, chatting with friends and acquaintances, a stark contrast to the somber mood expected of her. Meanwhile, her ex-husband, father of their 2 children, appeared surprisingly at ease, casually reading a newspaper during the service. 4 days after John's murder, 15-year-old Daniel was questioned about his involvement. 6 months prior, Daniel had paid gang members to kill his stepfather, but they kept the money and didn't follow through. After John's murder, investigators looked into Daniel again. Daniel confessed to paying to hurt John, not kill him, but was released after 9 days due to lack of evidence. Later, it was revealed that John's issues with Judy's children had sparked a deeper investigation into Daniel, which led to suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. When questioned, Christina denied any involvement, and like before, the alleged plan was dismissed. Investigators became curious about the funding behind these schemes, suspecting Judy as the primary source, given that both teenagers had expressed a desire to eliminate John. Further inquiry revealed that Judy and John's relationship had significantly deteriorated prior to his death, with at least one of Judy's extramarital affairs coming to light. However, sources indicated that John was committed to salvaging the relationship and had no intention of leaving his wife. The primary motive behind Judy's alleged targeting of her husband seemed to be financial, with detectives discovering 2 life insurance policies totaling $1 million. Judy had attempted to claim this money following her husband's death, but the insurance company initially refused to pay out, citing the ongoing investigation into his death. The payment was further complicated by John's father, who harbored suspicions about Judy's involvement in his son's demise. Despite these leads, the case eventually stalled, with only circumstantial evidence available. However, significant changes occurred within the Parker family household. Judy was rarely home, preoccupied with her new partner, Jeff, John's trusted manager. In her absence, the older siblings took care of their younger half-sisters, Tiffany and Erica. Months later, Judy and Jeff decided to move out of state with Judy's younger daughters, while Daniel went to live with his biological father. Christina remained in the house, now pregnant and with a boyfriend. Although the case stalled, authorities stayed vigilant, revisiting files for a break. After a new lead, they questioned Christina and Daniel's schoolmates, who confessed to selling them a gun. This tip led detectives to Christina's family land, where they found bullet casings matching those from John's crime scene. In 2007, a narcotics officer, who had been investigating Christina's ex-boyfriend in a drug-related case, came forward with crucial information. The ex-boyfriend, seeking a more lenient sentence, revealed a conversation he had with Judy in which she implicated her son Daniel as the one who had fired the fatal shot that killed John. When confronted with this new evidence, 21-year-old Christina, whose connection to the murder weapon had already been established, quickly began to cooperate. She confessed to buying the weapon and calling her parents on the night of the incident, asking them to stop by the office under the guise of picking up forgotten homework. She also admitted to being involved in the plan to kill John, with her brother Daniel as the designated shooter. When 19-year-old Daniel was apprehended in Arizona, he was confronted with the new ballistics evidence and his sister's testimony. He promptly confessed to shooting John, but claimed that Judy, their mother, orchestrated the entire plot. Daniel revealed that Judy had fraudulently cashed company checks to raise the $7,500 needed to hire hitmen, but the initial plan failed when the hired individuals took the money without fulfilling their contract. Judy then allegedly instructed them to buy the weapon for Daniel to use. Moreover, Daniel claimed it was Judy's idea to fabricate the pretext for leaving the house that night by making the call about the homework. He admitted to shooting John once in the head, and the second shot was an accidental discharge while searching John's pocket for his wallet, as per his mother's instructions. He was also told to return home without arousing his younger sisters, a task made possible by Christina, who kept the girls occupied with television. The siblings alleged that their mother had coerced them into committing the crime by claiming they were victims of abuse at the hands of John and promising them a better life filled with more money and freedom. It was also disclosed that this was not Judy's first attempt to kill her husband, as she had previously attempted to poison his food, resulting in only a brief hospitalization for John under the pretense of food poisoning. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. Christina entered a not guilty plea for the conspiracy charge and was released on bail several months later in March 2008. Daniel, then 20 years old, pleaded guilty to a conspiracy charge for involvement in his stepfather's murder and agreed to cooperate, implicating his mother in the crime. In exchange, prosecutors agreed not to pursue the more serious charge of murder, although Daniel still faced a sentence of 20 to 25 years in prison. According to Daniel, nearly a year prior to the incident, when he was just 14, his mother and sister first approached him to participate in John's murder. He claimed that his mother provided him and his sister with money to purchase a handgun, along with black clothing, gloves, and a mask for the day of the crime. She also allegedly gave him explicit instructions on how to carry out the task, including taking a thorough shower upon returning home to eliminate any traces of gunpowder residue. Ultimately, Judy took it upon herself to dispose of the weapon, the clothes worn during the crime, and her husband's wallet. In July 2009, 6 years after her husband's death, Judy faced the inevitable and surrendered to the authorities, agreeing to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. By doing so, she acknowledged her role in planning, executing, and covering up the crime. The prosecution requested a life sentence with a minimum of 28 years and a maximum of 35 years. Nearing 40, Judy was sentenced to 33 years in prison in late August 2009. The following month, Daniel received a 23-year sentence, and in early October, Christina, who pleaded guilty to aiding a criminal, was sentenced to 5 years. Press reports indicate that Daniel was released in 2017 after participating in a community transition court program and subsequently lived a low-profile life. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but tragically died from a drug overdose shortly after her release. This case is defined by unrelenting greed. Judy's difficult early life and subsequent success only fueled her insatiable desire for more, driving her to commit appalling crimes. Tragically, her actions not only ruined a thriving entrepreneur, but also had a profound impact on her 4 children, resulting in 2 being imprisoned and leaving the younger ones once again without their father and mother. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case, the case Fusako Sano. The victim, Fusako Sano, who later changed her name to Sachiko Yamada, was born on November 28, 1980 in Mitsuke, a small town in Niigata Prefecture, Japan. She grew up in an ordinary family with average income and was both loved immensely. Attending one of the local schools, she enjoyed baseball and rooted passionately for the local team. On November 13, 1990, just 2 weeks shy of her 10th birthday, Fusako, a fourth-grade student at the time, was returning home from school. She was running a little late because she had stayed behind to watch a school baseball game. Her parents were aware of the sporting event, so they weren't particularly worried when their daughter walked home on her usual route. It was already getting dark on a cold autumn evening. There were almost no passers-by on the street, and cars passed quickly, disappearing from sight. Suddenly, one car overtook the girl, then braked sharply and swerved in front of her. The loud squeal of brakes marked a sudden change in the young girl's life. Nobuyuki Sato was born on July 15, 1962, in the Japanese prefecture of Nagata, into a wealthy family. The head of the family owned a successful business related to passenger transportation. Nobuyuki was a late child. His father was 62 years old at the time of his birth, and his mother was 37. Nobuyuki had 5 siblings from his father's previous marriage, but had no ties to them. He grew up capricious and very spoiled, with no inhibitions. He was also very emotional, and sometimes even aggressive. If his demands were not met immediately, he could throw a tantrum. Once he even threw himself at his mother, with fists right in a store, when she did not buy him another toy. At school, Nobuyuki had almost no friends because of his complex character and strange behavior. He was quite tall and felt embarrassed about it, often slouching. This led to many offensive nicknames from other children. On one of the central streets of the city, his family built a luxurious 2-story house in European style. The second floor mostly consisted of a spacious and bright children's room for Nobuyuki. However, he did not like this room. He behaved restlessly and kept repeating that he was afraid to be there alone. This anxious behavior and unreasonable fears prompted his parents to seek medical advice. After an initial examination at a regular hospital, Nobuyuki was referred to a psychiatrist for further evaluation. There he was, diagnosed with numerous disorders, including nyctophobia, fear of the dark, and misophobia, fear of germs and dirt. Additionally, the boy exhibited a peculiar mix of autophobia, fear of loneliness, and sociophobia, anxiety related to social interactions. Essentially, he was scared of both being alone and interacting with others. Nobuyuki consistently remained an outsider. Despite his striking appearance, he had neither a girlfriend nor friends throughout high school. He ultimately became an outcast. Peers simply avoided him. His frustration and dissatisfaction found release solely in interactions with his elderly parents, who always forgave him and attempted to placate him with gifts or money. As an adult, Sato struggled to maintain employment. He frequently encountered conflicts at work, neglected his responsibilities, and created tensions with colleagues. For example, he might leave work in the middle of the day just because rain made him feel down. On one occasion, he even caused injury to a female coworker in what seemed like an attempt to gain her attention. Although this incident was labeled an accident, it resulted in his immediate dismissal. Following this event, Sato ceased working altogether and relied on his parents for financial support. Over time, he ventured out less frequently and engaged in more frequent disputes with his parents. During one such altercation, Sato set fire to their house, nearly destroying it and endangering its occupants. This action led to his compulsory treatment at a psychiatric clinic. In the clinic, Sato was diagnosed with manic depressive disorder and outbursts of uncontrolled aggression. There were also signs of misogyny, a deep disdain for women. He remained hospitalized for just over a month before being discharged after being considered no longer a threat to others. Following his discharge, Nobuyuki maintained relative calmness for some time and even embarked on reconstructing the partly burned house while adding a few more rooms to it. His efforts didn't last long. He simply abandoned the construction. After the first attempt at kidnapping and subsequent arrest, Sato became increasingly unsociable and sullen. He spent most of his time in his watching TV. Over time, he stopped allowing his mother and father not only into his room, but also to the second floor of their home. If this boundary was violated, he would pounce on his elderly parents with fists, shouting and threatening them with death. In the spring of 1989, Nobuyuki began to go for walks. He preferred walking near one of the local schools. closely watching the girls. At first, he behaved with restraint. He didn't approach or try to make contact with anyone. But one day, he grabbed one of the girls right at the school gate, threw her over his shoulder, and ran to his car parked nearby. This all happened in front of other children who immediately shouted and called for help. A school security guard and a few bystanders reacted quickly. They rescued the girl and detained the kidnapper before the police arrived. The girl Sato tried to kidnap was barely 9 years old. He couldn't explain why he had attacked her, so the only logical conclusion was that Sato was charged with attempting to commit unlawful acts of violence against a minor. He faced a serious prison sentence, but at his trial in August that same year, Nobuyuki was given only a year's probation. According to reports, his father helped him by using connections and paying a significant amount of money. Soon after, Nobuyuki's name mysteriously disappeared from the criminal database, again due to his father's efforts. However, this zealous effort by his elderly father led him to suffer a heart attack and die. His father felt acute shame and pain for raising such a monster. A year and a half after the first failed kidnapping attempt in Nagata, 28-year-old Nobuyuki went on the hunt again. Throughout this period, he maintained a relatively calm demeanor, avoiding police attention. On November 13, 1990, Nobuyuki left home, got into his car, and drove around there for several hours. As evening settled and darkness began to fall, he navigated to a deserted road where he soon noticed a girl returning home from school. The girl was 9-year-old Fusako Sano, who had unfortunately been delayed at a sporting event that day. There were no people or cars nearby, no one to call for help. Nobuyuki abruptly stopped and swerved to the curb right in front of the girl. He exited the car with a knife in hand, grabbed Fusako, and threatened her, stating that if she screamed or attempted to flee, he would slit her throat. He then forced Fusako Sano into the trunk of his car. After driving down the road for a bit longer, he turned onto a vacant lot where he opened the trunk again. He tied the girl's hands and feet and taped her mouth shut. As night fell, Nobuyuki drove to his house. He carried Fusako through an unfinished part of his dwelling to remain undetected. Then he exited again and re-entered through the door as usual. Nobuyuki went upstairs and once more threatened her with the knife, instructing Fusako to be silent. He tied her to the bed and warned her that if she tried to leave the room, look out the window, scream, or cry, he would kill her and dispose of her body in the ocean so no one would ever find it. Terrified beyond belief, Fusako complied with everything her kidnapper demanded, still hoping for mercy and release. When Fusako did not return home from school at the expected time, her parents began worrying. They knew she stayed late after school sometimes to watch baseball games, but it was getting dark and she should have been home long ago. Initially, the Sono couple tried to locate their daughter by tracing her usual route from home to school. Unfortunately, their efforts were in vain. As night approached, they turned to the police, hoping for a swift resolution, since only a few hours had passed since she vanished. Police squads began the search promptly, and by morning, dozens of volunteers from the local community had joined the effort. The following day, over 200 individuals participated in the search operation. They combed through the area, pasted flyers bearing the missing girl's photo, and interviewed passers-by in hopes of finding random witnesses. Notably, Nobuyuki lived in close proximity to both the girl's school and the police station. Moreover, he had previously drawn police attention for an attempted kidnapping involving this very girl. However, he was not considered a suspect due to his late father's influence, which ensured Nobuyuki's name did not appear in any criminal databases. The extensive search went on for several months. Authorities and volunteers checked numerous empty buildings, structures, trailers, and railroad cars. They searched suspicious vehicles and vacant lots, and even monitored interstate highways. Despite these substantial efforts, no clues or traces of the schoolgirl's whereabouts were found. Various theories emerged, including one suggesting that North Korean special services might have been involved in her abduction. However, as time passed with no successful leads, Fusako Sano remained missing. Captured by a maniac, as Fusako herself later recounted, she was initially terrified and complied with her captor's demands in hopes that he might eventually show mercy and release her. Nobuyuki had no intention of letting her go. During the initial months of captivity, he bound Fusako's hands and feet so tightly that it impaired blood flow and caused some loss of sensation in her limbs. Any sign of disobedience or breaking silence resulted in severe punishment. He used a stun gun on her and physically assaulted her with fists or threats involving a knife. At the same time, Nobuyuki never once took advantage of his victim in an intimate way during her imprisonment. He did not regard her as a woman, but rather as something between a living toy and a pet. Talking to Nobuyuki was her only interaction. He sat and fed the prisoner once or twice daily with food prepared by his mother, who lived on the first floor. Due to this meager diet, the girl became weakened and severely malnourished. He forbade her from getting out of bed, requiring her to use plastic bags for bathroom needs. Once a month, he bathed Fusako in a basin, cut her hair and nails himself, and dressed her in his own shabby clothes. Despite this, even when she behaved quietly and followed all of his rules, he still beat her regularly for amusement. After several years, Fusako was finally broken psychologically. She complied with all the demands of her tormentor and did not attempt to run or look out the window. Nobuyuki stopped tying her up when he went somewhere else and didn't even lock the door of his room. He merely made the bed with the prisoner lying there and threw a couple of blankets or towels on top, so that at first glance, it looked like there was nothing underneath. As time went on, Nobuyuki began to turn on Fusako's radio periodically and allowed her to watch television with him. However, they only watched shows or sports matches that interested him. He also brought her comic books, which he adored. These were the only things Fusako read during her years of confinement. For almost 10 years, she had seen no other people apart from her captor and had never spoken to anyone else or left the confines of her room. In fact, she stayed on the bed all the time and hardly moved at all. The girl had become so resigned to her fate that she did not even try to resist escape or make herself known. Regarding Nobuyuki's mother, she lived on the first floor of the house and for years had not entered her son's room because he threatened to beat her if she broke this restriction. Being well aware of her spoiled and violent son's behavior, she adhered strictly to his rules after Nobuyuki put a prisoner in the room. He forbade the mother from even going up to the second floor, and when she once tried to do so, he simply pushed the elderly woman down the stairs. She tried to work as much as she could and stayed home as little as possible. However, when she retired in 1996 at the age of 73, her life became unbearable. Her son regularly abused her, beat her, and forced her to follow a series of rules he had invented. Eventually, the elderly woman could not endure it any longer. In the spring of 1996, she went to the police and wrote a statement declaring that she was a victim of domestic violence by her own son. Unfortunately, the police did not want to handle the case and persuaded Mrs. Sato to withdraw her statement and deal with the family issues independently. The pensioner sought help from a public health center twice, where she complained about her son's inadequate and aggressive behavior, asking for his hospitalization in a psychiatric facility. However, she was denied assistance each time because her reasons were considered not serious enough. They advised her instead to persuade her son to voluntarily seek help at a clinic. In January 2000, nearly 4 years later, and after another severe beating, the exhausted elderly woman called a hospital requesting immediate medical attention and law enforcement presence because her son had tied her up and tasered her multiple times. This unexpected discovery prompted officials to finally respond to her complaints and visit their home. When the ambulance and police arrived, Nobuyuki became visibly nervous and acted aggressively. He resisted arrest and attempted to fight back. Due to his inappropriate behavior, officers had to handcuff him while medics administered a large dose of sedatives. The battered elderly woman admitted that she was terrified of her son's increasingly aggressive and uncontrollable behavior. She also revealed that she had not been upstairs for many years because he had threatened to kill her if she did. The police decided to inspect the second floor and Nobuyuki's room. Once inside, they noticed a pile of blankets on the bed, which suddenly moved slightly. Pulling back the blankets revealed a very thin, pale, and exhausted girl underneath them. When questioned about who she was and how she ended up there, she quietly gave her name and said that she had been kidnapped on her way home from school. A long time ago, following the disturbing discovery, Nobuyuki's mother was brought into the room and asked if she recognized the girl. The woman appeared very surprised and insisted she had no idea that anyone than her and her son lived in their house. The captive also confirmed she had never seen the woman before. On the same day, Nobuyuki was taken to the station for questioning. His statements astonished the police officers. He meticulously recalled driving along the road when he saw Fusako. According to Nobuyuki, he found the girl very attractive and decided to take her home with him. He claimed to care for her, feeding, washing, dressing her, and reading comic books to her. He asserted that he only punished her for disobedience. Furthermore, he confessed that he loved his captive as a friend, believing she reciprocated these feelings. Nobuyuki expressed no intention of ever releasing her and hoped she would stay with him for life. He enjoyed spending time talking with her for hours about various topics such as skateboarding, soccer, music, or his favorite comic book characters. Despite this interaction, Fusako never attempted to escape. Nobuyuki concluded this meant she liked living with him. After a medical examination, doctors concluded that despite his mental disorder, Sato, Nobuyuki, was able to recognize his actions and could stand trial. His mother faced potential involvement as an accomplice because she regularly purchased feminine hygiene products at his request and possibly suspected something was amiss. However, it was considered that she repeatedly contacted police and medical institutions but received little response. The case garnered significant public attention even before the trial commenced, leading to strong criticism of city police. Notably, Nobuyuki had previously been prosecuted for attempting to kidnap a schoolgirl, but remained above suspicion when he carried out his plan successfully. Consequently, both the local police chief and head of the regional police department were removed from their posts due to their inability to control the situation effectively from the outset and their numerous mistakes. Nobuyuki Sato was brought to trial in May 2000. All his actions, even the smallest offenses, were meticulously scrutinized and added to the case. The prosecutors aimed to secure the maximum possible punishment for the kidnap. Consequently, Sato was found guilty and sentenced to 14 years in prison. This term was deemed the maximum at that time. He was released in the spring of 2015. By that time, his mother had long passed away in a nursing home, and Nobuyuki had no other relatives. He himself was found dead a year and a half later, in early 2017, in a small rented room. The cause of his death was not disclosed. As for the girl's life, at the time of her discovery, Fusako was so weak that she could barely stand on her feet. Doctors diagnosed her with exhaustion and dehydration. Her muscles were practically atrophied. Additionally, she stuttered, was frightened of sunlight, and had nearly lost her communication skills. When her parents saw their daughter for the first time, after nearly a decade apart, they didn't recognize her immediately. It took around a year for Fusako to recover physically to some extent, but her mental health took much longer to heal. Fusako Sano suffered severe post-traumatic stress disorder. She avoided people and intellectually remained at the level of a 9 or 10-year-old child. Her parents moved her out of town, where she changed her name to Sachiko Yamada and flatly refused to speak with the press. Over time, though, she made friends and took up photography. She even passed her driver's license test. However, in 2007, she faced another traumatic event when her father drowned before her eyes during a family trip to a river. No story is more sorrowful in the world than the tale of Romeo and Juliet, concludes the Duke in the most famous story about two lovers. Yet in Shakespeare's tragedy, Romeo and Juliet end their lives by their own choice. while in our story, the young lover solves the problem differently. The creation of the Borden family began in Missouri. Michael and Catherine met in school. They were classmates. Michael was captivated by his blonde, radiant, and responsive classmate. In the upper grades, he tried various ways to get her attention. He helped with homework and invited her out for walks. This way, they became best friends and spent a lot of time together, learning lessons and sharing secrets with each other. Gradually, their friendship turned into something more, and they realized they were in love with each other. Michael invited Catherine on a date where he first declared his love. After some time, the young people got married. The wedding was a beautiful and memorable ceremony, where Michael and Catherine promised to love each other in all life circumstances. After 10 years of marriage, the family moved to Lititz, Pennsylvania. Lititz was founded by members of the Moravian Church in 1756, and it was inhabited by descendants of Moravian communities. The primary population of the town were faithful families who sought refuge in their oasis from the horrors of modern life. Life in the town was quiet and peaceful. Many families belonged to the Christian Amish community and led a lifestyle befitting a believer. Their life was simple, with people trying to do without many modern technologies. The Borden family was deeply devout, so the choice of Lititz was no accident. This suburb seemed perfectly suited for the birth and upbringing of children. Life flowed so calmly that a new day was just like the last. This was precisely what the Bordens were looking for: complete family solitude and creation in solitude with God. Michael served in the local church community and taught lessons in Sunday school. Catherine primarily managed the household and assisted her husband in his work. In the community, Michael worked more for spiritual wealth. For everyday worldly needs, he had to work as a manager at a printing company. In the following years, they had 5 children, 3 boys and 2 girls. Most families living in Lititz were large, with some having more than 5 children. Hoping to shield their children from the hardships and dangers of the larger world, families regularly attended church, while local teenagers joined youth groups and were homeschooled. Interactions between families were limited to joint religious societies and celebrations. The family idol created by Michael Borden lasted for many years, with children being raised in faith and discipline. In the early 2000s, the eldest sons, having reached adulthood, went to university and moved to another city to study. This left 3 children at home who continued their homeschooling to the delight of their parents. Neighbors and the couple's few friends spoke highly of the children's upbringing and their diverse interests. Kara, Caitlin, and Daniel were exemplary, kind, and responsive. But it wasn't always this way. As the eldest daughter, Kara, entered her teenage years, it turned the family's traditional ways upside down. Despite her father's prohibitions, she began playing in the local soccer team, sneaking out to discos, and thoughtlessly doing everything she had been forbidden to do before. The young beauty's behavior deeply shook her father. Many hours of talks and instructions did not resonate in Kara's heart. Reasons for arguments appeared, which time and again led to the young rebel's escape. The girl openly showed interest in young men and sought relationships. Thus, in 2005, 18-year-old David and 14-year-old Kara met in a support group for students involved in homeschooling issues. The young people, with their passionate hearts attracted to all things forbidden, quickly established warm, friendly relations. Secretly from their parents, they agreed and created social media profiles, where they began actively exchanging messages. The correspondence was lengthy and very emotional. They exchanged well-encoded messages to keep their communication secret from everyone as long as possible. After a while, exchanging letters was not enough, and they began secretly meeting. At first, these were harmless walks in quiet, secluded places around the city. Then their friendly relationship evolved into a romantic one. They ran away together at night to discos and spent time together until morning. David was older and had already experienced first love and disappointment. Kara was so young that her new, bright feelings could hardly be contained. She didn't just walk, she seemed to fly, and a happy smile never left her beautiful face. Meeting David brought back the obedient Kara to her parents. Her father was overjoyed, believing that the teenage challenges were a thing of the past. But Michael was mistaken. Only the fear of being discovered by her parents quelled the girl's inner fire as she hid her love from them. This deeply saddened Kara. She knew what their reaction to such early relationships would be, as she had been instilled with entirely different concepts of possible love between a man and a woman from childhood, trying to protect her from such knowledge for as long as possible. Fearing their parents' negative reaction, the young couple carefully guarded their secret. But sooner or later, all secrets come to light. One day, unable to hold back, Kara shared her secret with her sister. She showed her a photo of David, shared how their relationship began, and that they were so in love and determined to be together against all odds that they were ready to run away. Her sister, fearful for Kara, told their mother about the planned elopement. Thus, the secret of the young lovers was revealed. One early morning, the young woman climbed through the window into the house and quietly, like a mouse, went up to her room. Elated, Kara was returning from another date with her David. She entered her room and froze. Her mother was sitting on her bed. Everything became clear without words. After breakfast, a conversation took place in which her parents forbade her any relationship with the young man. They were shocked, having shielded their children from violence, controlled substances, and other negative stories, that such misfortune had befallen them. Kara's father was so outraged and disappointed that he forbade her from leaving her room. That night, Kara Borden spent in David's house. At 5:30 a.m., the young lover dropped her off near her house. They agreed that as soon as Kara safely returned to her room, she would send him a text message. However, the awaited message never came. David called her home several times and sent a few messages on social media. An hour later, Kara informed him that she was caught and asked him to come over so her parents could talk to him. David arrived at the appointed time. The conversation began with the father expressing deep indignation and forbidding the young man from seeing his daughter. Kara's parents' morals and stance were very conservative. They were categorically against relationships at their daughter's young age. Words of love did not touch the father's heart. He warned the young man that if he saw him with Kara again, he would be compelled to report him to the police for involvement with a minor. The lengthy, emotional conversation ended on a high note. Kara was locked in her room again, and David left with nothing. The young man got into his old car and drove away, crying for the first time over a girl, or maybe out of hurt that he was not taken seriously. The separation was very difficult. The lovers struggled greatly through the long days apart. They couldn't withstand the test of separation, so they devised a plan, deceive everyone by accepting Kara's father's conditions, pretend to break up, but continue their secret love. And they convincingly played the part of former lovers. In public places or at church, they didn't even greet each other. Kara's parents were appeased, convinced they had protected their daughter from a youthful mistake. David missed her terribly. In the evenings, he read Shakespeare, imagining openly serenading his beloved like Romeo. But in the Capulet and Montague tragedy, the lovers could not reconcile their families and receive their blessing. David Ludwig took decisive action. He called Kara's home asking for a meeting with her father. The young man was very serious and asked his beloved to talk about their upcoming marriage. On November 13, 2005, David Ludwig arrived at the Borden residence for a talk with Michael, the father of his beloved Kara. He announced his love for Kara, their ongoing relationship, and their plans to marry. Michael's response was dismissive. "That will never happen." Anticipating such a response and coming prepared, David, fueled by rage, drew a handgun and shot Michael in the back as he was walking towards the front door. Then, David sought out Kara's mother, Catherine, and shot her while she was sitting on a chair. David then searched for Kara in the house, calling out for her, but he couldn't find her. Afterwards, he got into his car and started to drive away when he saw Kara running down the road towards him. She got into the car and told David she wanted to go as far away as possible, get married, and start a new life. The young couple fled the city in the boy's red car. But why would a 14-year-old girl run away with a young man who had just shown such brutality? Wasn't she shocked and scared? Both were considered good kids. How did they turn into criminals? Kara Borden was reported missing for 24 hours after her parents, Michael and Catherine Borden, were found deceased. After reviewing surveillance footage, the police followed the trail of the teenagers. The footage also proved that Kara had not resisted but willingly accompanied David. Charges of abducting Kara were dropped against David Ludwig. Alerts were issued across the east as Pennsylvania and Indiana police investigated sightings of the couple heading west in a red Volkswagen Jetta. Authorities received a tip on Monday morning about a vehicle matching that description parked near a truck stop outside of Fort Wayne. Police headed to the area, but the car was gone. State police were alerted, and patrols spotted the car around noon on I-70 in Belleville. David Ludwig merged onto the interstate, leading them on a 5-mile chase at speeds of 90 to 95 miles per hour on a 2-lane highway. State Trooper David Cox, who was involved in the pursuit, described Ludwig as extremely reckless and dangerous at that moment, causing multiple accidents like in an action movie. The saga of the runaway lovers became a top national news story. Television broadcasts showed the capture of the teenage fugitives after the boy had ended the lives of his girlfriend's parents and took her with him. It turned out the lovers planned to escape far away, get married, and start a new life. The district attorney, commenting on the investigation, stated that the earlier abduction charge against the teenager would be dropped, but the charges for the demise of Michael and Catherine Borden would remain. Ludwig and Kara Beth fled together after the incident and were on the run from the authorities for about 28 hours before being apprehended in Indiana. Kara Beth was not charged with any crime. David Ludwig was detained without bail on charges of ending lives and abduction. Kara Borden was taken into the care of relatives and church members. David Ludwig was arrested on November 14, 2005, after a high-speed chase ended with his vehicle crashing into a tree. He was charged with the demise of the Bordens following a prolonged dispute. 14-year-old Kara Borden faced no charges. On November 16, David Ludwig was extradited back to Pennsylvania after waiving extradition. The failed Romeo confessed to 2 counts of intentional harm. "It was a deliberate act. I intended to shoot them if they got in our way, and I did." During the search of the young man's vehicle upon his arrest, no weapons were found. But when police visited Ludwig's home, they discovered 54 firearms. This arsenal belonged to Ludwig's father, a hunter who taught his son how to handle weapons. An 18-minute video from a laptop in his home showed Ludwig discussing plans for an armed invasion of another family's home, showing him bringing weapons into the house, though court documents state they abandoned this plan due to too many cars present. The police declared Kara Borden a victim in the case, yet Ludwig filed court documents claiming surveillance footage from various stores along their route would prove she was not abducted. Ludwig did not resist efforts to return him to Pennsylvania. A Pennsylvania judge ordered him held without bail. He was not represented by an attorney during the charge presentation. A preliminary hearing was set for November 23rd. The trial of the young individual responsible for ending 2 adult lives in front of their children was brief, as detailed in court documents. Kara's 13-year-old sister, Caitlin, told investigators that her parents were shot after arguing with David for about an hour. According to court documents, Caitlin saw Ludwig shoot her father, then ran to the bathroom where she heard a second shot, presumably the one that took her mother's life. Ludwig then ran through the house calling for Kara, she told investigators. The couple's 9-year-old son ran to neighbors who called 911, reporting the tragic event. In June 2006, David Ludwig entered a plea agreement with District Attorney Donald R. Totaro, who had sought the death penalty as punishment. Thus, Ludwig pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree perpetrating among other charges, and was immediately sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences of 9.5 to 19 years, and was also ordered to pay $125,000 in restitution. Since 2006, Kara Borden has been under guardianship, represented by a legal counsel. In written statements published on November 22, 2005, the abduction charge against David G. Ludwig was dropped. The court concluded that Kara Borden left with Ludwig of her own free will. Ludwig's lawyer reportedly stated that Kara voluntarily accompanied David during their journey through 3 states, and surveillance recordings show that Borden had ample opportunity to escape. Kara admitted that she ran after Ludwig as he left her house. Kara Borden simply wished to marry her beloved, David Ludwig. Kara Beth has been identified as a victim in this tragic situation, and thus the district attorney of Lancaster County did not levy any criminal charges against her. Her actions, alongside Ludwig's during the investigation and the digital trail of emails, blogs, and texts they left behind, contributed to this decision. At a solemn memorial service held at Lancaster Bible College, Kara Beth, amidst her siblings, mourned the loss of her parents. The Borden family's neighborhood showed its respect and remembrance by adorning mailboxes with white ribbons. The loss left 5 children without the guidance and love of their parents. George Landis, an elder from the Monterey Chapel, reflected on the incident by saying that the purpose behind such loss is known only to God, reassuring that Mike and Katie are in a better place. Vera Zimmerman, 50, familiar with the Borden family and Ludwig's mother for 7 years, remarked on the upbringing of the children, pointing out that a lapse in judgment led to the unfortunate events. Friends and neighbors recalled Kara Borden as a joyful and sociable young girl, known for her babysitting in the neighborhood and her passion for soccer. Kevin Eschleman, executive pastor at Ephrata Community Church, noted her regular participation in youth group activities. However, underlying tensions between Kara and her parents were noted by Zimmerman, highlighting concerns over Kara's interest in boys. Samuel P. Lohr, a friend of Ludwig, disclosed to authorities their secret intimate relationship, marked by flirtatious electronic communications and inappropriate image exchanges, according to legal documents. Zimmerman mentioned a significant decision by Kara's parents to disconnect her internet service in response to her relationship with David, indicating their disapproval. The peaceful town was left in shock by the grim events that unfolded, resonating beyond the local community to wider circles, especially those involved in homeschooling. Friends of the family struggled to comprehend how such sheltered children could commit acts of grave severity. Officially, they weren't considered a couple due to parental disapproval of their relationship, shared Stephanie Mammon, a 16-year-old neighbor of the Borden family. This incident underscores the dilemma where David Ludwig, faced with opposition, chose violence as a solution to his problems. David G. Ludwig's appeal for release was ultimately denied by the state appellate court, as announced by the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office. Following his sentencing on June 20th, Ludwig underwent various assessments at Camp Hill before being moved to a state prison in Indiana County to start serving his life sentence for the taking the life of his girlfriend's parents. David Ludwig, at 19, was transferred on August 3rd to the State Correctional Institution at Pine Grove, announced by Susan Norton, spokesperson for the State Department of Corrections. The state chose the Indiana State Prison for Ludwig because of its youthful offender program. Designed for inmates aged 15 to 20, the program aims to teach self-responsibility, discipline, respect for others, and self-worth. According to the Department of Corrections, Pine Grove, opened in 2000, houses some of the state's most challenging young offenders in a therapeutic community setting. Inmates at Pine Grove start their day at 6:10 a.m. with a roll call, followed by a 6:30 a.m. workout session including squats, push-ups, and jogging in place. They return to their cells at 7:15 a.m. to get ready for breakfast at 7:30 a.m., with lunch at 11:30 and dinner at 4:20 p.m. The bulk of the day is filled with 4 hours of educational classes, ranging from culinary arts, business, computer drafting, heating and cooling system installation, to building maintenance, and 4 hours of personal life management skills training. Inmates also participate in the 90-day military-style leadership development program fostering honor, discipline, honesty, and respect. Transitioning from the county jail, where Ludwig earned his high school diploma, to the state correctional facility was a challenge for the young man, stated Merrill M. Spann, one of Ludwig's attorneys. He will also be amongst young people from the general population and will be able to have visitors. The change was difficult because the county jail was smaller, and he had gotten used to the environment, Spann said. The cost of housing an inmate at Pine Grove, which employs about 430 people, is approximately $120 a day. Mr. Ludwig will be assigned jobs such as janitorial work or food service, and he will engage in daily recreational and educational activities, Norton stated. Inmates can earn between 18 to 42 cents an hour working as carpenters, plumbers, cooks, and laborers. The money earned can be used to purchase clothing, footwear, food, and personal items at the prison commissary. Most of the 250 inmates at Pine Grove stay until they turn 22, after which they are transferred to adult prisons to serve the remainder of their sentences. David Ludwig, now 37, is serving 2 consecutive life sentences for shooting Michael and Catherine Borden in their home in November 2005, after they told him he could no longer see their 14-year-old daughter, Kara Borden. In his latest petition, Ludwig referred to alleged issues, including being treated as a juvenile offender serving a life sentence. He cited the 2012 U.S. Supreme Court ruling, which found life imprisonment for juvenile offenders to be unconstitutional. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court recently denied the request, agreeing with Lancaster County Judge David Ashworth, who previously deemed the challenge untimely and unfounded, according to the county prosecutor's office. Ashworth stated that Ludwig does not deserve the same consideration as minors because he was 18 and a half at the time of the tragedies. David Ludwig is currently incarcerated in Luzerne County. Kara Beth Borden, the 14-year-old girlfriend of 18-year-old David Ludwig, who is accused of ending the lives of the Borden parents and fleeing with her to Indiana, has reunited with her family in Pennsylvania. However, as CBS News correspondent Sharon Alfonsi reports, it remains unclear what role Kara Borden may have played in the incident. According to Alfonsi, the police now view Borden as a victim. She has not been arrested, which leaves open the possibility that she played a significant role in the unfolding events. Given her age of 14, there's also speculation about potential charges against Ludwig for involvement with a minor. Warwick Police Chief Richard F. Garipoli Jr. told CBS News, "Kara is upset, she's crying. She's 14 years old, and it seems we forget that. She's devastated. This has completely changed the fabric of our community," a Borden neighbor involved in the memorial service told CBS News. "They were wonderful people, and we'll miss them terribly." "It's complete madness, absolute madness," said the Lancaster County, Pennsylvania coroner G. Gary Kirchner. "This isn't a Romeo and Juliet deal. It's much worse." Thus, a decision made in a moment of fury and desperation took 3 lives. Why do we say 3 when there are 2 victims? Having received 2 life sentences, 18-year-old David Ludwig will live out his days in prison, never again to make a choice independently and never to be free again. But is that truly living? The community long remembered this terrible story and couldn't understand how such positive children could so casually commit such evil. Unfortunately, homeschooling didn't prevent this horrific tragedy. Growing up and being educated in a Christian environment didn't stop the cruel act. Perhaps the parents, trusting in God and faith, missed something crucial in raising their children or failed to convey the important lessons of Christian faith effectively. Maybe they weren't fulfilling their parental duties adequately, not having heartfelt conversations with their children, or trusting each other enough to prevent their daughter's secret escapes and stop the quest for new experiences. Perhaps it would have been better to allow the children to live without mentioning the Almighty, still sharing with their children the life they themselves had lived at a young age, where there weren't so many restrictions and deprivations. Deciding for the children, parents eventually face disappointment from the decisions made later on. We can only speculate what might have prevented this tragedy. From all we've learned, one thing is clear: violence always leads to more violence. When we're taught to live with violence, we become good as long as we're coerced and accepted as part of life. The more we practice, the more we endure, and then use violence to solve our problems. Unfortunately, much of this acceptance of violence comes from Christian homes. On December 20th, 2017, a press conference was held during which Mark Perez, special agent in charge of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, announced a breakthrough in the disappearance of Mike Williams, a Tallahassee real estate appraiser who was originally presumed to have drowned while duck hunting on Lake Seminole on December 16, 2000, and was eaten by alligators. "Being here now, I can tell you what happened to Mike Williams," Perez said. "Mike Williams did not drown in the lake. He wasn't eaten by alligators. He didn't leave town and leave his wife and 18-month-old daughter behind. He was murdered. In the interest of the investigation, we cannot yet release details, but I am happy to report that this morning investigators notified the Williams family of recent discoveries in the case." Today's story is not only about love, betrayal, infidelity, and greed, but also about a mother's resilience. For 17 years and 4 days, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mom, disagreed that her son had drowned in Lake Seminole and pushed with tenacity for law enforcement to investigate her son's disappearance. She believed with all her heart that those responsible would be punished, believed even when no one else did. "I had two choices. He was alive or dead. I chose to believe he was alive, and I really think that's what helped me," Cheryl said on December 20th, 2017. "A lot of people called me crazy, but if I had given up, we never would have found him." The day before the press conference, Brian Winchester, a close friend of Mike and his wife Denise, who later married Brian, was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Mike's mother was right. Retribution came to those responsible, and ironically, they were the cause of the truth coming out. In 2000, Brian and Denise's affair, which began in 1997, turned into a murder. And years later, they went from lovers to strangers who didn't trust each other. Brian was very afraid that after the divorce, Denise would inform the police about what had happened to Mike, so he attacked her. Denise, on the other hand, went to great lengths to get him a life sentence. She was very persuasive in asking the jury for the maximum sentence, and it was these efforts that led to Brian having nothing to lose, and he made a deal with the prosecutor. Brian was sentenced to 20 years in 2017 for the kidnapping of Denise Williams, but he avoided a life sentence. Denise was celebrating the victory and was unaware that the conviction was part of a deal in which Brian Winchester, 49, admitted to planning the murder and a 17-year cover-up of the murder, and received immunity from any prosecution for his role in the case. In exchange, he led investigators to Mike's body and gave a full and truthful confession. It would only be a few months later, and on May 8, 2018, Denise Williams would be arrested. At first glance, things are a little confusing, aren't they? Let's break down this case in detail. Jerry Michael Williams was born on October 16, 1969, in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee, the son of a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. Family and friends called him Mike. Even though the family didn't have much money, and the boy, along with his older brother, grew up living in a trailer, those were happy times. The parents cared about their son's future, and instead of building a house, they set aside money for the education of both boys, who themselves worked part-time at night in supermarkets. The sons enrolled in North Florida Christian High School. There, Mike excelled. He became student council president, played soccer, and was active in the Key Club. At the age of 15, Mike started duck hunting as a hobby and met Denise Merrill. The young lad was a soccer player and student council president. Denise was a cheerleader and council secretary, and they began dating. Friends thought they were a great couple. While still in high school, Mike became best friends with Brian Winchester, whom Denise introduced him to. Brian later had a friend, Katie Thomas, and the two couples remained friends for the rest of Mike's life. After high school, Mike attended Florida State University, where he majored in political science and urban planning. The lovers graduated together. Denise became a public accountant. Mike became a real estate appraiser. Mike proved to be a valuable worker. He often worked 15 hours a day, and of course his career took off. In 1994, the young, successful man married Denise. It was around this time that Brian married Kathy as well. All four of them continued to stay in close contact. Mike loved his wife dearly, strived to provide for their family as best he could, and had incredible energy. At the age of 31, Mike Williams achieved considerable success. As a real estate appraiser, he was earning nearly $200,000 a year. The couple was able to afford a home in a small, upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and in 1999 became happy parents. They had a daughter, whom the couple named Ansley. Mike's friends told me that he was always prudent. Since the young man was engaged in quite risky activities, he wanted to be sure that in case of disaster, his family would definitely be taken care of. Not surprisingly, Mike turned to his best friend, who was working as an insurance agent at the time. Brian sold him 2 insurance policies for $250,000 and later for $500,000. In 2000, Mike's father passed away. Williams was so stunned by this suddenness that, wanting to financially secure his own family, he again turned to a friend. Brian helped Mike to insure his life for $1 million. Thus, about 6 months before his disappearance, the life of the loving father of the family was insured for almost $2 million. According to Denise, on the morning of December 16, 2000, her husband woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. It was the day of their 6th wedding anniversary, and the couple planned to celebrate the date at night in Apalachicola, a small town on the bayou. The wife and daughter waited for Mike at home at noon, but he never returned. Naturally, Denise became concerned and called her father, who in turn called Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Together with his father, Brian drove to Lake Seminole. There they found Mike's Ford Bronco car near the boat dock. But Mike himself was nowhere to be found. The men went around to all the places Mike liked to hunt, but couldn't even find the boat. So they decided to call the police. After investigators from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency were called, the search for Mike began. A few hours later, a helicopter pilot found the boat drifting about 225 feet from the boat ramp. A search of the boat turned up Mike's shotgun, still in its case. Apparently, he never got to use it. The search became a rescue operation. Locals believed that before the 3 rivers were dammed to form the lake, the reservoir was the site of an orchard. Thus, the lake got its name Stump Field, due to the many remaining stumps that protruded above and below the water level, requiring careful handling of any motorized boat in the area. Because of this, searchers speculated that Williams hit a stump on his boat, fell out, and submerged himself in the water. His wading boots filled with water, and he probably drowned when he couldn't get out. Several other agencies were called in to help, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. But the extensive and methodical search yielded nothing. Mike was never located. A week passed and the rescue operation turned into a body search operation. Teams were given probe holes to probe the bottom of the lake, and dogs were brought to the site. 10 days into the search, volunteers found a camouflage-patterned hunting hat that could not be linked to Williams. Officials with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency speculated that Mike had been eaten by alligators, which is why the body could not be found. There were actually quite a few alligators living in the lake. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement found no signs indicating a violent death and agreed with that theory. After 5 weeks, the search was called off. The day after the search was called off, Denise held a memorial service for Mike, less than 2 months after the alleged accident. It seemed to everyone that Denise had come to terms with the loss of her husband, but Mike's mother had not. 6 months later, in June 2001, an angler discovered wading boots floating in the lake. Divers searched the lake area and retrieved a lightweight hunting jacket and flashlight from the bottom. In one of the jacket's pockets was a hunting license with Williams's name and signature. The find raised many questions. Neither the hunting jacket nor the boots had visible teeth marks indicative of an alligator attack. None of the items found showed signs of having been in the water for 6 months. The boots were not slimy and the flashlight still worked. However, a week later, Denise's attorney asked the court to declare Mike Williams dead. Based on the items found, he suggested that alligators and other aquatic life had swallowed the body whole. The motion was granted. The death certificate said Mike died on December 16, 2000. Cause of death: accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. The body has yet to be recovered. This is how Mike Williams's story might have ended if not for Cheryl Williams, who refused to give up and continued to search for her son. "All I know is that I can't stop looking for him until I find him," she said. Cheryl's efforts seriously strained her relationship with her former sister-in-law. Denise demanded she stop searching and accept reality. She said, "I'm tired of seeing articles about Mike and his disappearance. I just want to move on with my life. If you keep pushing this investigation, you will never see your granddaughter again." Cheryl couldn't give up on her son, and Denise carried out her threat. If not for the mother's persistence, her son's story might have remained submerged at the bottom of a dark, algae-covered lake. It took Cheryl Williams 3 years to convince law enforcement officials to open an investigation into her young son's disappearance. "I made phone calls, put up signs about my missing son, wrote to the governor of Florida every day, compiled my notes into an evidence book, asked people to post on social media, and contacted reporters," Cheryl will tell you years later. The persistent mother contacted Matthew Oresco, an alligator expert. In his response, he explained that alligators do not feed during the cold winter months. Cold weather causes water temperatures to drop, so alligators don't feed in the winter. All they do is maintain their body temperature. 14 degrees is too cold for an alligator to be interested in food at all. Moreover, Oresco wrote that after an alligator kill, there is always forensic evidence left behind. Eventually, after 3 years, Cheryl Williams convinced law enforcement to drop the ridiculous alligator theory and launch an official investigation into her son's disappearance. The case was reopened because of little-known facts regarding alligators' eating habits. Evidence gathered from interviews and a little official data convinced investigators that Williams' death was no accident. "My gut feeling is that Mike did not die in Lake Seminole, and that's the general consensus of all the law enforcement agencies working on this case," said Rami Austin, a former investigator with the 2nd District State's Attorney's Office who prosecuted Mike's case. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency initially took over the case because Williams was considered a missing hunter. Officers spent 735 hours searching a 10-acre section of the lake for the body, but didn't spend a minute looking for signs of wrongdoing. Jackson County Sheriff's deputies brought in to help with the search also did not consider other possibilities. Investigators interviewed everyone involved in the search, and police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene that day, years later said, "Some things immediately look strange. Williams didn't usually hunt alone. His truck was found in an undeveloped area from which he would have had to drag the boat over mud, not on the nearby concrete boat launch he usually used. A terrible storm that night should have pushed the boat to the east shore, but it was found on the west shore. The boat's motor wasn't running, but it was full of gasoline. If Mike had been driving the boat and fell out of it, it would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of gas." Unfortunately, law enforcement began to doubt too late that they were dealing with a simple drowning. The crime scene had already been trampled by numerous volunteers and searchers. A car that could have served as a clue was taken by the family without any verification. Potential witnesses were missed. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester became suspicious to investigators because they learned that Winchester had divorced his wife Kathy and married Denise. They also learned of Denise's unexpected financial gain of nearly $2 million from her late husband's life insurance policy. Detectives determined that it was Winchester who sold the policy to Mike. They also found it strange that Denise, as Mike's wife, did not want to have anything to do with the investigation and tried to prevent Cheryl's activity, even forbidding the grandmother to communicate with her granddaughter. In 2005, the newly married couple were called in for questioning, which gave nothing new to the investigation. Brian provided an alibi for the morning of the disappearance of Mike Williams. He said he was 60 miles from the lake, at home, in bed, as his ex-wife Kathy could attest. He said he had intended to go hunting with his father-in-law in the morning, but overslept. Denise's interrogation also yielded no new leads. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement announced that Mike's disappearance was not an accident, and they believe he was the victim of a crime. However, without sufficient evidence, they alas cannot prosecute. We have suspicions, but we need proof. Another investigation failed to find out her son's fate, but Cheryl Williams did not give up again. Her efforts led to the Discovery Cable Channel doing a story on Mike's disappearance and subsequent investigations in late 2011. By then, Cheryl had become disillusioned with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, believing it was either incompetent or uninterested in solving the case. Beginning in 2012, Mike's mother wrote about one letter a day to the governor, Rick Scott, asking him to either assign the investigation to another agency or appoint a special prosecutor to do so. Cheryl sent 2,600 letters to the governor over 9 years. In 2012, Denise caught Brian cheating and they broke up. The following year, Denise filed for divorce. After a few more years, an appraisal of the former family home was to take place, after which even property issues would no longer bind them. This event was a turning point in Mike's case. Brian didn't want a divorce. Denise didn't want to continue the relationship. They were constantly fighting, and the Williams investigation was poking fun at them. Brian would call Denise, and she stopped returning his calls. He couldn't handle the stress level. On August 5, 2016, the day a real estate appraisal was due as part of a court order, Denise left her home to drive to work at Florida State University. While talking to her sister on the phone, she saw someone climb over the back seat of her car. It turned out to be Winchester. Brian pressed a loaded gun against Denise's ribs and told her to drive straight ahead. He said he had to do that because she wasn't answering his calls. Denise tried to calm Brian down, agreed with everything he said, and promised to give him a chance to save their marriage. Brian believed it. Denise assured him that she wouldn't go to the police and report what he had just done, and Brian got out of the car. As he got out, he took the brown sheet, plastic sheeting, bleach sprayer, and tools with him. It became clear that Denise had miraculously escaped death. Denise called emergency services. Brian was quickly arrested and charged with kidnapping, which is a first-degree felony in Florida and carries a life sentence as the maximum penalty. He was also charged with domestic violence and armed burglary. The court decided to keep Brian in custody without bail. Cheryl Williams expressed hope that this development will lead to the solving of her son's disappearance case. Brian is not going to let Denise run around alone with all that money, she told the New York Daily News. I pray that he will tell us what really happened. And Brian did tell, bargaining himself an extremely favorable deal with the prosecutor and avoiding a life sentence. At first, I think we were all doing really well. But I wasn't a good husband. Brian began his story. One day, I found a note in my first wife Kathy's purse and realized she was cheating on me. I wanted revenge. We often went to bars and concerts with Denise and Mike. I had been friends with Denise since high school. I was never really attracted to her. But after Kathy cheated on me, I started looking at other women differently. The affair between Brian and Denise began in October 1997. One-time drunken sex at a rock concert quickly escalated to frequent secret meetings. We started meeting at hotels during the workday. We met whenever we had the opportunity. Brian recounted. He did not want to divorce. Denise made it clear that she would never divorce her husband. Public opinion was important to her, and she did not want to share custody of her daughter. Over time, the affair became more than just meeting for casual sex. Denise and Brian thought of themselves as a couple, exchanging gifts and love letters. It became clear that they couldn't go on like this. They could not be without each other, and divorce was unacceptable to Denise. Her pious image was not to be harmed. Around this time, Mike almost died in a hunting accident. Brian saved him, and Denise suddenly saw a way out of the situation. After the deal with the prosecutor, Brian will reveal, the year 2000 prompted us to start talking about Mike and Kathy's death. Denise wanted it all on me, not her, and she wanted a scenario where it wasn't a murder but an accident. She wanted death to be left up to God. That way she could live with it. After considering various options, Brian and Denise settled on a boating accident. In doing so, They timed the murder so that they could get the maximum possible payout on Mike's life insurance policy. They both realized that Mike had to be killed before one of the 3 policies expired at the end of December 2000. The plan was in place. Brian called his friend to go hunting. He said he'd found a great spot on the shores of Lake Seminole. Mike expected to go there with Brian and return home by noon to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. I told him that we were going to go to a special place and that he absolutely had to bring his wading boots with him. I had to make sure he took them with him because it was believed that if you fell overboard in wading boots, you would drown very quickly. The plan was to make death look like an accidental drowning. Once Brian and Mike were in the water, Brian pushed Mike out of the boat, but instead of sinking, he grabbed onto the stumps and began to wade through them to the shore. Brian panicked. I didn't know what to do. Mike started calling loudly for help. I didn't know how to get out of this situation. I had a shotgun. I was panicking and I shot him in the head. I didn't think about what I was doing. Things didn't go according to plan, and I needed to cover up what happened. There was hardly any time left. I should have been back home by now and getting ready to go hunting with my father-in-law. No one knew I was at the lake with Mike, so I decided it would be best for me to drive home and pretend like I had overslept. I drove home and hoped that Kathy was still asleep. I entered the house as quietly as I could. Katie was asleep. My phone was on the floor. I went to bed, called my father-in-law, and apologized. Brian did everything he could to create an alibi for himself. Then he hid the body. Denise didn't know that Brian had shot Mike in the head and buried him. Brian tried to tell her, but she didn't want to listen. It was enough for her that her husband was gone. Denise wanted to go on living with the idea that it was God who kept him from swimming out and let him drown. According to Brian, they promised each other that neither of them would ever say anything. Denise and Brian justified what happened by saying that the main reason Mike was killed was because it was impossible for them to live together. We said the money was just the cherry on the cake, Brian would pronounce in court. Investigators learned that it was Brian who planted a hat, boots, flashlight, and license. First, he needed to keep the searchers from leaving a lake, and afterwards he needed grounds to pronounce Mike dead so Denise could get insurance, since a recognition process usually takes about 5 years. The lovers managed it in just 7 months. Including Social Security and other benefits, Denise received about $2 million. On May 8, 2018, Denise Williams was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory to a felony, which carried a life sentence. Denise pleaded not guilty to all 3 charges. In February 2019, she was sentenced to life in prison. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter, Ansley, received all of her late father's assets and insurance money owed to Denise. In January 2020, Denise Williams appealed the conviction and life sentence. Her attorney argued before Florida's First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence that she was involved in committing the murder. In November 2020, the murder conviction was overturned, but the 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld. Denise is now in custody at the Florida Women's Reception Center. She will be 78 years old when she is released. Brian Winchester was transferred to Madison Correctional Institute in Florida to serve the remainder of his sentence. His current release date is set for July 30th, 2036. He will be 67 years old. Ansley, daughter of Mike and Denise, insists her mother is innocent and places the blame on Brian Winchester. She refused to speak to any media regarding the outcome of the case and her personal life. According to Cheryl and Nick, Ansley's uncle, they have not been able to connect with Ansley. Cheryl is very sorry that she has lost not only her son, but also her granddaughter.